This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today is a highly experienced and skilled coach, speaker, facilitator, and consultant with a passion for helping individuals and organizations achieve their goals through personal development and transformation. With over 2 decades of experience in leadership development, team building, communication skills, and business improvement, he is well equipped to help organizations improve their performance and reach their goals. Please welcome founder and CEO, Ken Lewis. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. And, you know, all of those great skills that you learned, I'm sure you can attribute to your military service. So thank you for your service.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And, you know, why don't we jump right into your military experience, because it did teach you a tremendous amount in terms of like what you're doing today. You know, what was the big reason why you decided to join the military?
I think I sometimes laugh at that question only because in the military, we know the answers. That you'll hear people like, I did it to travel. I did it to get away from the environment that I was in. I think that social environment I was with was going nowhere fast. So I did it because I didn't want to be that same person. And I signed up for the Air Force. And 2 weeks later, I was in boot camp because I knew I needed to pull that escape hatch immediately, just where I saw my friends going. And it ended up being a lot more than I expected. But I can also tell that from that transition, going from high school and getting away from that environment into the military, is unfortunately, I still brought that bad mindset with me. So my first 4 years in the military was rough because I was still acting like that ignorant child that I was in high school. And it took some hard knock lessons, right, for me to kind of adjust and realign what's important to me and how my actions either support that or don't support that. So it was an interesting method of just how I got started. And it might be relatable to back in the days where I had to do it so I didn't go to jail type of thing, right? But I felt it wasn't court ordered, but I know I needed to escape my environment.
What was that environment that you were trying to change? And you kind of just alluded to it.
Yeah, it was bad influences. You know, I was drunk and high by like 10 a.m. after I got out of high school. You know, so after I graduated, there was a bunch of us living in a regular old small building, and we were doing nothing productive. We all talked about these things we wanted to do. How about we all join the military together as a team or whatever like this? And before this occurred, I was dead set on not joining the military. My mother and father were both in the Army. I didn't really want to get back into that lifestyle. And I was making all the choices that were going to make me land up somewhere else. Right. And I don't know, something just changed where it's like, I can't do this anymore. I just felt like I was being embarrassing. I loved not like the day I turned 18, I was out of the house, but I wasn't going anywhere. I don't think I really had any goals or values or anything that was really attached to anything like a personal connection. But I knew that where I was going to end up was not on my initial radar. And that's what kind of forced me to. I didn't have a car. I remember it was like, oh my God, an hour and a half walk down to the recruiter's office. But it was, maybe that was the first big commitment I ever had that I needed to make a change in my life. And I was going to do whatever it takes. Did it so fast to where I was gone in 2 weeks to leave, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting that you had that realization because, like you said, you know, I mean, you're, I guess, in your teens, and you said you're drunk and high before 10 o'clock. So it's like when, you know, you must have had some sort of like roots or some foundation built in that, you know, you have more potential. Who were some of those people that were instilling that in you?
I would say, so in those years, I still had a passion for giving back and doing volunteer work. It was a big part of my nature, and it still is today. But I had a very strong work ethic. I was working 3 different part-time jobs while still going to school. So I knew I had this ambition, this energy to do better and to do more. It wasn't really focused energy. But I think a lot of it was really taking a look back on how embarrassing I was to my mother. My mother was going to school. She was working full-time job. She was really taking care of us. And we did have both parents in the house, but she was really pulling a lot of that weight on everything she was doing. I don't think I could face the fact of if I ended up in jail or ended up somewhere, like what was I was the oldest child. So I also didn't want to set a bad precedent for my younger brother and my younger sister. So I think all those things kind of played into like, I got to change because more or less the embarrassment of having to face my mother of bail or something like that. Right. I didn't want to have that conversation because I knew that's where I was going.
Right.
I mean, it also was kind of disappointing to the fact that my house was the house that all of my friends would come to because they loved my mother's sweet tea. She would bake cookies. She would, she was one of the boys. She was one that everybody can come and still have fun. And she had fun with us. And now if I was going to throw all those memories away for hanging out with some of those same crowd members, but now we're going down a completely wrong path, I don't know how I was going to face that music. Right. And so I'd rather avoid that at all costs versus actually having to face it.
What were some of the decisions that some of those people made?
And I had one colleague that, I guess, old friend who showed me, he was comparing, I met him at my 10-year reunion, right? And he was showing me his stab wounds in his leg. And he was proud of it. And I was like, man, that's where I could have been. Yeah. Another friend that I was with was still high, showing me his wife with his 3 kids. They all had different mothers, right? So there wasn't, but he was still not amounting to anything. And I was like, this is what I got away from. And that was the last time that I'd been to my home, was because those individuals that I was hanging out with, they still are doing those same things. And we're only 45 minutes away from the Mexican border. It was a small city. We didn't have a whole lot. We had one high school. And I don't know, it just was not going. Yeah. Right. Looking back, I was happy I got away when I did, because I was like, man, that could have been my leg, right? Or I could be in that same boat, not amounting to anything. And I'm glad that I kind of forced myself down a different path.
Yeah, and I guess we understand the pride too in some of that, is that, sometimes when we're in a situation where, we feel there's no out and we feel that this is like what we're destined to have and everything, it's like the stab wound is our big pride, because it's like, look at what I was able to survive, and how lucky you are to be able to get out of here. But meanwhile, it was a decision that you made. And so, let's go back now to that recruiter's office. What was that conversation like when you spoke with that recruiter?
He actually had to pull my file back out, because I had talked to him earlier in the year. I did the ASVAB, I did everything like that. And when I walked in there, he's like, Ken, I thought you were never going to come down this path. I was like, no, I need to do it. So he had to reactivate it and get the process going. So we had done a lot of prep work earlier in the year, but then I kind of reneged on that. It's like, I'm not doing that. It's not an option for me. And he was just kind of surprised. What I thought was an interesting conversation is when I came back, there was a program called the Recruiter's Assistant. So after I finished my basic training and then my the formal education for that, I came in as a pharmacy technician. So once I finished that schooling, I went back and did 2 weeks to support him. And one of the things was he had pictures of us all on his wall saying, these are people that he has put through and so forth. And he's like, Ken, I got to ask you a question. When people see your picture, they have some interesting things to say about you. What the hell did you do before you got in the military? Right. And I was like, it's all in my application, sir. I'm not going to sit here and say anything else, but people knew that I was a fun guy that wanted to go out and let's smoke weed and stuff like that. And the fact that I was always smoking weed and then I ended up in a pharmacy around legal drugs was kind of like the comical connection between that. But it was interesting when people saw those pictures and they saw that nobody ever thought that my picture would ever be on that wall. At least not unless it was a wall with like an orange jumpsuit or something, right?
Yeah.
So it was one where he had written me off. He didn't think that I was going to take that next step. So it was a bit of a surprise that I actually walked through his door and said, where do I sign?
Yeah. And, it's funny, like I'm doing a county fair right now and the recruiters are there and they're such positive, upbeat guys. But they also know that they're signing this youth up for obviously a life-changing experience for you and for many others and great opportunities with school and with work and all these other things. But they're also on the other side of it, signing them up to potentially go to war, potentially defend our country. So there's two sides to the coin. So I'm interested in, when you talk about, you kind of reneged on the first time, was there any fear about having to go to war? Was there, and then on the other side of that, was that kind of what was holding you back, or was it other things that were holding you back from making that decision?
Yeah. 9/11 hadn't happened then. I graduated in the year 2000. So when I went in, it was still pre 9/11. So I had no thoughts of war. I mean,
Right.
I did remember my dad being deployed during the Gulf War. And, I remember I lived in Germany when the Berlin Wall came down, and people would bring in pieces of the wall that their family members were able to get while we were stationed there. But I never really understood the impact of what war had on the military family at the time. I just knew my dad was deployed. I would see things on the news, but it didn't really register as it does today. So I really think it was just my defiance of the military, the hierarchical structure. I did the program of the JROTC when I was in high school, and I was always defiant. I never really wanted anybody to say, this is how you're going to do it. And still to this day, I have a bit of that in me, but I don't snap back as I did as a high school kid. But I didn't really care for that hierarchical structure, and it wasn't a good match for me at the time. And I think even still is probably why I got in trouble a lot my first 4 years, because of that same behavior and mindset that I had. Like, what? No, this is not going to work this way. And I just didn't really want to sign up for that type of culture or environment. Right? I probably didn't use those words at the time, right. But I think if I was to analyze it, that's what it was going to be. But then there's got a point to where that's a small price to pay. I can deal with that, right? And sign anyway. So, but nowadays, yes, a lot of people are faced with those things of, looking at what the social media has with different parts of the world, Ukraine, for example. When is that going to rope us in? And the impacts that those have. I didn't have those same thought process. I didn't join for a war. So what people are thinking of, yes, is very real. You have to think about those. And maybe if there was a war going on, I don't know how I would have reacted. I don't know if I would have signed as quickly, because of the fact that, hey, if I sign this paper, I could end up in a combat zone. But on the flip side of that, I started as pharmacy. I got out of pharmacy and became an explosive ordnance disposal technician, which is a bomb tech, once the war started. So I had a pretty safe job once it did kick off. But I didn't feel like I was doing my part anymore. So even though I had this safety net around me, I needed to get out of that safety net and actually contribute. Because then I felt maybe that was my higher calling, high purpose. Like, I know I can do more. My skills, my mentality, everything, I can contribute more. I feel like they're not tapping into my potential here. And I went to a dangerous career field with the whole idea, like, I can do it and I can help. And I want to be like taken off leash type of mentality. So maybe there's people that have that connection to a different purpose and want to do it anyway. But I didn't know that at the time. And it kind of uncovered as after 9/11, had some time from the incident to where I made that decision to switch careers.
Yeah. And I mean, and then you excelled obviously in the military life and had direct reports, and we're going to talk some more about that. But I kind of just want to stay in this area just for a moment here, because we're here and now in terms of your high school friends and your old school friends, and as you started transitioning into the person that you are today. Something that I think, I know I've dealt with personally, and I still have challenges here, and so many others as we're reinventing ourselves, and as we're walking away from a life that could have been, that wouldn't have been our best life. The difficulties and challenges that come into that. And so that I could bring this kind of like back to you here, in that, as I've changed over time, like, so I stopped drinking, I stopped hanging out, I stopped doing a lot of things. That transition has been going on for about 5 years for me. And, first it was like the text, we don't see you anymore, where you been, how do you don't come around, oh, look who it is, those kinds of things. And now it's more so with my family, because, they don't, it's not about hanging out, it's more about coming to family parties. And so I have to explain to them, hey, look, I started 2 businesses. I have my insurance company, I have my speaking company, and I'm trying to live as a good father and a good husband, and I'm trying to do things with my nuclear family, and so I can't come to this party, and it's like, oh, we don't see you anymore, and so it's hard, right? It pulls on your heart, it pulls on you, and so I'm interested in if you could share how you were able to kind of overcome some of that as you started transitioning into this new person.
Yeah, so early in my military career. Again, I don't think I did that transition quite well, because I still got in a lot of trouble and making a lot of bad decisions. In fact, I had 2 Article 15s in my first 3 years of military service, which is a form of, non-judicial punishment in the military. And there's not a lot of people walking around that have those, especially not in today's military system. But it just shows that, I had a couple of mistakes. But the thing is also that I say now is they were never the same mistake. Right? Like I got corrected, and it's like, I'm not doing that again type of thing. And it wasn't until I was presented with the opportunity to move from South Dakota, which was my first assignment, with the option to go to Japan. And that it's like I was debating on getting out of the military at the time because I, still was a little bit defiant. I was like, this is be exciting. This is a new opportunity. And that was a switch for me, my first switch. Like, there are better things out there. I can go down and experience this whole new culture, a new environment, get away from all the things that I don't like here, still in America. That's right here in my backyard. Maybe I'm not in Arizona where I grew up at, but now I can just experience. And I'm glad that I did, because that was my first dose of another culture. And it reminded me that just the small window that I had in my, I guess you say, evolution at the time was just a glimpse. And the people that I was hanging out with would have never gotten me to live 3 years in Tokyo, right? That would have never been an opportunity if I would have still been that same person waking up on the couch with a bomb. Mm-hmm. So it was, I guess, looking back at the time, the choice was, what do I want to do? Do I really want to go back there to this, or do I want to go live in Tokyo? And I was like, heck yeah, Tokyo sounds great. But then the further and further I got away from those people, then I started realizing that there was one friend that I hung on to, and it took me a little bit longer. He was my best friend, known him since the 4th grade. But it took a little bit. Like, okay, I now need to remove that from my social structure as well, because I can't be affiliated with who I wanted to be and where am I going. And it wasn't until once I finally switched into explosive ordnance disposal, got top secret clearance, then I was a lot more aware of who do I want to be affiliated with and the impact that it could have on me. So I think as I grew in these development cycles, these development stages, I started to be more aware of how my environment and the people I include in that environment could affect opportunities that were available, whether or not it shut the door for me or opened the door for me just by affiliation. And it got easier and easier to make those decisions. And I would say, like, even with my wife right now, with our family, we're still trying to navigate those same choppy waters of finding the balance. And it's to the point where, like, this right here, my immediate family right here, my 2 kids and my wife, that's what's important. Like, I've had my time with them. That's great. But if they can't support me now, well, they're not going to be next to me on my deathbed. If it's, 60, 70 years from now, they might not even be here anymore. What's important to me is right here, what's in these 4 walls or in this home. Right. And when I sit down and talk about what's important, where we're going, I don't call my mother. I don't call my dad. I don't call my brother what are their plans. I'm talking about right here. Where do we want to be? What opportunities I want to create for my children? And I think that's kind of the driving factor. Are they still important? Absolutely. Do I want them part of the picture, part of the family? Absolutely. How much decision do they have? I'll hear them out, but ultimately it's going to rely on to my values at this time, which is going to be the legacy I want to build for my family. I don't think I was as clear on maybe that process or that strategy as I was evolving in my life, but I think it all comes down to, and people say this all the time, right? The power of proximity. Who do you keep in your network? And all of that. I don't think I didn't know the label at the time, but I think I understand the principles just by experiencing that I needed to mark some of these people that were maybe important to me once, but they were going to be more of a weight dragging me down versus something lifting me up.
Yeah, and it's so fun. It's great that you bring that up in terms of the people that we surround ourselves with, and it's the truth about it is that I just had a guest on just talking about where he grew up, and he grew up in a small town in the South, and he was just talking about how making $30,000, you were on top of the world, right? And so if he stayed in that small town and stayed in that mindset, that's all he would earn. But when you start and when you start putting yourself around earners, around people who earn a much higher income, you start realizing, 6 figures is actually achievable. So it's pretty wild. So I need to get some more of those around me. But I think but it speaks to the truth of, like, when you see of the people who are successful, their circles, and how so many of those people in that circle are successful. And it's not just about money either, by the way. It's also about all the different things of that, spiritual or giving back, and just being also successful in marriage and in life and in raising children. All of that are great examples of surrounding yourself with people that are successful, that are doing the things that you want to achieve, and having those people in your life. In the military, as you got through your Article 15s and got through, the rocky first couple years, which, look, I think the biggest thing I learned is giving ourselves grace as we are breaking through our old selves and finding this new person on the other side of it. We're going to fall back. We're going to have challenges, and we got to forgive ourselves for that and realize that that's part of the learning and growing, is that we're going to kind of fall off a little bit. But as long as we keep striving and keep keep accomplishing and keep going after our dream and working hard to become that better person. That's what matters. And so you did. You made it over those 4-year humps, and you started leading a team. And that's where we go into where it really started making some life-changing decisions for you, because later on in life after the military, it really started helping you. So if you could share a little bit about the military experience and when you started leading, what that was like for you.
Sure. And so thank you for that, because this is an interesting perspective that, I kind of gained over the years. My first 8 years was as a pharmacy technician. And so it's a culture within a culture. What I saw growing up is, as a leaders within that type of environment, was a lot safer on how they led. There was also a lot more bickering. It was just a different approach. And when I transitioned over to explosive ordnance disposal or bomb squad, where your life depends on the other members in your truck, like it's literally a life or death situation, versus pharmacy, kind of cozy. I don't want to make a mistake and hand out the wrong pills and put the wrong, especially if it's an infant. I want to make sure that I don't cause harm to another. But over here on the EOD side of the house, I don't want to cause harm to my teammates or to myself. I don't want to be the person that has to escort somebody home. And I share that because I think my perspective on leadership, or how it is when you're with team, working as a team member or as a team leader, what is the impact that has? And that is something that's kind of fueled my passion today, is knowing that everybody should have a voice on that team. And it doesn't really. So when I came in, I came into explosive ordnance disposal, or I'll just say EOD for short for now. Is that even though I came in with a little bit of rank, I was a staff sergeant, I still was the inexperienced guy because I didn't know that craft yet. I was not a sufficient bomb technician at the time. So when it comes to leadership, did I have the rank to be, maybe dominating in some situations? Yes. But rank didn't matter when it came to an incident where I needed the most experience to provide that insight. And I think that's where I totally altered my perception, where you start. And another bad thing, when people come in the military, we have a tendency to look at their sleeve. Oh, you're only, this rank. You've only been in for a year. That's your rank. But what if they're like 35 years old and what they're bringing to the table is a crap load of life experiences that can still be applied to the situation you're facing? MacGyver was a big thing back in the day. You never know what kind of MacGyver techniques they're going to bring to your solution. So don't discredit them automatically because they might not have been in your career field or your job for this amount of time, but still hear them out, give them a voice. And I think I learned that in my development as an EOD technician, that everybody has a perspective. And in fact, our lives depend on seeing this from multiple views. And it got to a point to where one of the questions that would be asked before we step out of our truck to go, walk down on a dangerous situation is like, does anybody think that this is going to kill me right away? Like, what do you see that I didn't see? I need to hear that. We need to hear that. And there was one story where it was a safe scenario. It was just an incident with aircraft when I was in Italy, where our youngest guy, he was only in E2 in the military, so he's still fairly new, still learning, wasn't sharing his perspectives. And when I was asking him about it, he ended up saying that he was told that his job was to shut up and listen. And that angered me on so many different levels. One, that somebody told him that, but two, that he felt he still needed to do that with our team, because that's not how we operate. Like, how would you feel if you saw something and I went and did the very same thing that you saw was a threat, and then now I got hurt? How is that? How are you going to go home with that on your mind? So it just shows kind of the value of how do you appreciate a team and the value that they can do, and giving everybody their credit, because they, no matter what their age is or what it is, they bring something to the fight, and don't discredit that automatically. I did not have that same opinion when I was in the pharmacy tech. Back then, it was like, here is the hierarchy, here's a structure, here's your job descriptions, here's our work hours, here's what you're going to do. It was a corporate structure that's like, we got patients. Number one thing is, decrease wait time. We're going to get them out the door. And if you don't follow these rules, and I was in fear every day of something going wrong, because I didn't feel like I had any empowerment, anything to deviate. No, I couldn't tap into my own creativity or anything, right? That was just, that structure at that time was just a different beast. Mm-hmm. So I think that plays an influence on where you are as a team leader or a team member. Are you feeling empowered? Can you at least feel encouraged or empowered to speak your mind and somebody give it some thought or encouragement? You might not go that route, but do you have the opportunity to share it? And that's a big part of who I am today, making sure that is still something people incorporate into their value system, or how they operate, as allowing the opportunity to be vulnerable and open-mindedness and teamwork. In fact, I keep my core values here, and two of them are open-mindedness and teamwork. Like it just, I didn't realize at the time, but it's really huge, because my life did depend on it. And I think if businesses would look at it the same way, your company could depend on it. If you don't listen to somebody else or give them the time of day, could your company die? You might not get blown up on a device, but would your whole company blow up because you didn't hear the one advice? And how's that going to work for retention? I left the position simply because I thought that everything that I brought to the table was being dismissed automatically. That doesn't go with my values. I don't want to be there. So it did shape how I operate and how I think, like, immensely to my behaviors today.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to you also mentioned servant leadership, and I would love for you to kind of unravel what that is and what it means to you, servant leadership. Now, I believe that what you just shared there is a lot of servant leadership, but we hear the term, and so I would love if you can just share a little bit more about that term.
Absolutely. It's the ability to be able to serve those that work for you while still serving the needs of the company and the organization. And by saying serve, it's not saying that you're going to relinquish all of your authority or you're going to give up any type of command you have in a structure, but it is asking and getting to know your people and asking them those questions like, why is this important to you? What's going on? How can I make your lives easier? How can I give you the power to make decisions where you feel comfortable making those decisions? And, the inclusion, be part of the team. I do tiptoe around the phrases of like inclusion and diversity because sometimes there's the political stigma that it has today when you start thinking about the gender issues and so forth. But again, when I look at it, I want an inclusive environment where, again, people have the ability to bring all their experiences to the table, their backgrounds, their education, their cultures. Like, I want that type of inclusive environment where you feel safe, where you can do this. And being a servant leader is that. It's not saying that you are going to be a slave to those that work for you, but you're going to pause and give yourself the ability to listen to them, try to, approach situations empathetically when necessary, and know when to change the hats. That way people can, ultimately the goal is to create an alignment. I want to be able to I listen to my personal values. Do my personal values align with the organizational values? Or how can you help me understand that connection and really make me feel like I am part of the team? And if I don't feel part of the team, there's going to be a disconnect and I might not be bringing my 100% to the table. But why? I don't feel like I belong. So how do you create that environment where people can feel like they belong, that you have their best interests in heart, as well as the companies, if you can create that alignment and just make the best of that situation, right? Yeah.
And I think, and to add to what you're saying there and bring it back to an example that you shared in your bio here with me, it's also being vulnerable and sharing when you make mistakes, right? Because I think being a leader is all great. Like you're showing them how to do things and you're listening to them. But it's also important for us as leaders to say, hey, look, I screwed up over here and I'm owning up to it. And here's how I'd like to resolve it with you. And you had some situations like that you shared with your direct reports where you had to kind of own up to them and then make up for it. And I would love for you to kind of just articulate that for our audience today.
This was a period in my time. Well, I honestly feel like I learned this lesson a little late, but I'm glad that I learned it. I think I was in the service by 16 years already. And it was how I delivered feedbacks. How would I have my one-on-one sessions with my direct reports? And at the time, it's very normal for us in the military to have some type of annual evaluation period. And we were given a sheet. I have to check some boxes. How well did you perform? Did you do what we said we're going to do? And then nobody ever really, I know, like the people I work with, we never wanted to do this, experience it, live through it, but it was a requirement and it was something that we just had to do. And it wasn't until I was experienced to the idea of the thought process. And it was actually from Jack Welch's book, I think it's called Winning. And
the former CEO of GE.
Correct. And in this talked about the radical candor and that, for example, if it ever came to a scenario to where you have to let somebody go, it should never have been a surprise if you were to bring them in your office and have to let them go. They should know where they stand every step along the way. And I wasn't doing that for my team. I was just going through this process and never really giving them the actual tools and strategies to make that next rank. Or what are you doing right? I was just checking boxes and kind of giving them some motivation and encourage. Great job. Keep up the good work. See you next year. Right. And with this particular epiphany, I guess I'll call it, is once I had this, I had 4 direct reports at the time, and one at a time, I start out the feedback. I owe you an apology because I have not been setting you up for the next rank. Here's what I should have been doing, and I wasn't, and here's what we need to do. But first, what are your goals? Where do you want to be? And I was scared about doing that at first because I'm saying I screwed up, but it came out so much natural. And out of the four, three of them all had some kind of ambitions for the next rank. One was comfortable where he is at, but it was great for me to hear that because then at the same time, I told him, okay, out of this particular rank, you're number 2 out of 4, and here's why. If you want to be number 1, here's what you can do. Or you're 4 out of 4, here's why. And if you want to be number 1, here's what you can do. And you now the table is, like the ball's in your court type of thing. I've given you, if you want this, here's what you could do. And now that I also am aware that this is what you want, I can look for those opportunities that you specifically we discussed. And if being a sponsor, if I'm sitting in a board meeting or in a room and I hear an opportunity, like, hey, I got a guy for that. Right now, I know to speak up because we've had that discussion. I know your ambitions. I know where you want to go. And versus me just checking boxes off and having this non-genuine discussion because we're doing an annual requirement. We'll take the time because you are setting an hour aside, or I was setting an hour aside, and I wasn't using it to the greatest capability. And over time, I've learned that as a leader, our biggest KPI, right? How we report our key performance indicator should be how many leaders are we creating underneath us, to take our spot. And that's something I've experienced in the non-military. Is there's a little reservation on how much information do I share because I don't want to be outworked, I don't want to be outshined, I don't want somebody to take my spot. But from the military, I bring that, like, you don't know if you're going to be here tomorrow. I need somebody to be able to take my spot. And the more they can do, then that's the next thing I can learn because now I'm empowering them to do this, and then I can bring something else on my plate. So it's this evolution that I want to develop more leaders. And I think between this discussion or this epiphany again, that I realized that I was failing on doing that. I wasn't having that openly candid conversation of, and I think what I also changed in here too is I gave them the evaluation report on me. Like, if you could fill us out, and if you want to have a discussion on how I'm doing, by all means, we can do it. Like, this is going to be your opportunity. Now, it's also an opportunity to where it's constructive. You just want to have some kind of fest where you're just going to kind of unleash, but it's not going to go anywhere. I'm not about that. But if there's things that you like me to do differently, or I'm not doing to the best of my abilities, we can talk about that. Only one took me up on that offer, but it was on the table at all times. Like, let's do this. And I think that was the interesting, like, here's my feedback form on you, but here's also one you can do on me. Like, I think they have a voice to rate me. Like, why not? And one of the things, I think I'm kind of going on a tangent, but one of the things that when I made the rank of Master Sergeant, which was E7 in the Air Force, a complaint that I had is now everything had changed. Now I am the mentor for others. I'm going to go and help these people fit their path. But I felt like I lost all my mentors. Like, I just stepped into a whole new tier called the senior non-commissioned officers, and I'm brand new, but I'm bringing in this knowledge as a tech sergeant, as a non-commissioned officer. And I'm automatically, yes, what I did was said, I'm ready for the next level. What I didn't say is I'm an expert at the next level already. And I think that's a failure we have when we promote people to new levels. And okay, yes, they identify that they possess certain skill sets, maybe the technical capabilities, and they possess the leadership skill sets, but they're just saying that they're primed and they're ready. Does that mean that they're done growing? Absolutely not. And I wish I would have had more abilities to be mentored while mentoring others. Because, law of the lid, John Maxwell talks about how your organization is only going to go as far as a leader. So if my capabilities are here, I can only train people up to here. And then what? So unless I'm still growing, I can't bring others with me. And that's something that I now take passion that I wish that I would have had when I was, coming towards the later years of my military experience, and want to instill that when I speak to others of the importance of that, because there is a cap if you don't continue to kind of like raise the bar each and every year.
Yeah. And it's like what Tony Robbins talks about, if you're not growing, you're dying. So you do always want to be growing. I think that there is an opportunity still to learn from the students, right? The teacher can learn from the students. But to your point, in terms of leadership, is that, you can certainly learn some things from a student, but you still also want to be stretched and pushed to learn more. I think you also kind of articulated the servant leadership when you're talking about sponsoring someone, is that's part of serving that team, that group that you're leading, is that you're able to offer them new opportunities. And you mentioned that in there as well. And offering them those opportunities. So, and you said it was later on in life, it was later on in your career that you learned all of this, but it's never too late. It's the whole adage of like, when was the best time to plant a tree? 100 years ago and today and right now, and so it's about, and that's what leadership is. It's about realizing our flaws and not just doubling down on the flaw, but like changing and being like, you know what, there's a mistake here and I got to make a change here. That's the
and
whole...
It doesn't end, right? Never
right.
ends.
The whole quote unquote pivoting. So speaking of transitions and pivoting, share with us what, September 1 of 2020 was like for you.
It was an odd moment, right? So that's when I officially left the military after 20 years and 9 days of service. And initially, I thought I was going to be in the military for 30 years. I was like, I'm going to ride this train and do all. But I didn't have a family then. My children are 4 and 6 at the time, so they came a little bit later on in my military career. But my goals obviously started changing. My discussions with my spouse, my wife, also made a difference in that. And a 30-year, what was a single vision, I needed to figure out how I can combine that into this family vision of where we wanted to go. And it was the idea of me staying for 30 years was causing more heartache and more harder discussions. So what I ended up doing was making a decision like, okay, here's what I agreed to do. But the 2-year window before that happened, I will prepare myself to get out. I will do all the check boxes that I'm allowed to do. So that way, if I make the decision to get out, I can do that. I can make that pivot. But I'll also still try to earn the next rank. So if I don't decide to get out, I can still do that. So I kind of didn't shut any doors right away. And March, COVID hit. That changed the game a lot. It was one of these periods where, as I was still setting up myself to get out, a lot of doors were being closed at the time. A lot of job opportunities that were on the table, they had to be rescinded, or they couldn't have the discussions because everybody went on this freeze. And jobs that I thought were available, they said, I'm sorry, we can't hire in that. We're only going to be hiring this particular domain right now, or this current career. So we're still interested, but we can't do anything right now. But as it got me down a path of researching and doing more, and then I started seeing that there's a ton of opportunities for me when I get out. And this was still a long journey, right? But it exposed me to the idea that there's a lot more that I can do. I start facing the questions like, okay, I'm just a bomb technician. I don't want to do that when I get out. I'm not going to expose myself to that level of danger anymore. I want to be hopefully alive still for my children. And so there wasn't an option. And as I was doing these different assessments, asking questions, I started discovering career fields that I never even heard about. In fact, the first job that I landed, I didn't even know it was a thing, but it was all my soft skills, how I talk to people, and all my life experiences, not just as a bomb technician, but all those other additional duties that I had while in the military. Being a government purchase card holder, being in charge of the budget, all these little tasks that I had no idea was anything else than just as requirements that I had in the military. But when you look at them and transfer those skills into the sector, I could do a SWOT analysis. I can help them do this whole, where are we going with this particular idea? And there were skills that I had, and I had the comfort of explaining my idea, right? But I think the transition part was, I still left the military with this scarcity mindset, and I didn't know that was a thing. And it wasn't until we talked about it earlier, that proximity circle, I started being exposed to different materials. And my goal getting out of the military is I wanted to land a job that met a certain income, and I did it. But then that was my goal. So what should have been just a milestone, a stepping stone to a much larger goal, wasn't. Like, that was the goal. And if anybody reads, the 10X rule by Grant Cardone, when you hit that goal, you kind of throttle back. You're not putting in the level of effort. And I felt comfortable where I was at. And as I started thinking, I was like, man, this is not going to get me where we want to be as a family. Like what we talked about, the new home, all these visions, these dreams. And I realized that I needed to change it up. And it wasn't until I started thinking that, hey, millions of dollars is possible. Like, why isn't it possible? Yes, I've seen a $1.5 million budget, but it was taxpayer money I was signing. I just had to make sure I did my due diligence, that we were being sound fiscal stewards of the taxpayer's dollar, right? It never was really real money that I physically touched or thought that I would ever see it. So when I changed that thought process, that I am capable, that I'm not going to limit my own potential, that it is something that I can do, now let's go get it. And to the point where I was like, I left my job because I realized that was not going to get me down that path that I wanted. Like, there was a ceiling, there was a cap, and it was going to take me an extended long period of time to really maybe reach some of those levels that I wanted to do a little quicker. So it was a transition within the transition, because on top of that, there was, the imposter syndrome. What are my skills? What can I bring to the table? The biggest one that really brought me into some dark spots, I think, was realigning that own self-identity, or what is my purpose? Because at the time, I was a Bob technician. My entire job was to, within the best of my ability, was to either save lives directly by disarming an explosive situation, or training individuals that could do the same thing by allowing them to be trained, equipped, and stay alive in that mission. And I had a lot of attachment to that, like a lot of pride. It was, we were a very prideful organization. There's only about 1,000, maybe 1,100 of us in the Air Force, very small community. one of the few that got to do, combat on the ground missions. Most of the Air Force is related to, air missions or space missions and stuff like that. So we were a very tight knit community, and I was giving that brotherhood up for what next. And that led me down this really dark path to where even suicide crossed my mind. Where am I going to go with this? Who am I now? What purpose am I doing? I'm sitting on my home. I'm not the same person I was. And all these questions about myself. And it really took this period where I was sitting down at home and I was sitting in the couch, literally debating on whether I'm going to do this or not. And what came down, I had a checklist. Nope, that's not worth staying alive. Nope, that's not it. Nope. And what came down to it was my children. It was like this thought. There was a last thought I had. I was like, there it is. Like, that was it. Why was that last thought, not the first one? I have no idea. I think I was looking at all these non-tangible things or hanging on to my past identity of what was important to, Master Sergeant Ken Lewis as an EOD tech versus now knowing that I'm the father, the husband, the entrepreneur, all these other labels. But if you would ask me who I was nothing but Master Sergeant Ken Lewis, Air Force EOD, and I was giving up that entire identity. So that was an eye-opening moment, knowing that everything that I attached to was to a title, to a role that I was giving up. But now that I had to really take the time to identify that I'm a lot more, that's just a hat that I should have been wearing. It shouldn't have defined who I was. That should have just been, what hat am I wearing in this situation that I'm walking into, and being able to switch that hat as necessary. So that was a big period of growth that I experienced in transition, because the self-doubt, am I doing the right things? How am I ever going to match up to that same level of purpose? But it doesn't have to be the same level of purpose. At least that's the thing. It just has to be important for me to work towards it. Like, this is my purpose for where I am at in this stage of life. And it could change in a year or 5 years from now. That's okay. But it took me quite a while to come to grasp or come to terms that it was okay, that I can't compare that this purpose was any more or less important than this other purpose. It's just a different stage in my life. And it's okay if I'm not saving lives, but now the lives I'm preparing, that I'm building, are my two children. Right. So it took a while for that connection to really sink in.
It's so interesting that you talk about this, and I thank you for sharing so much with us here, and obviously going deep into, as you said, suicidal thoughts, and even going through a checklist. And what's interesting to it for me is that I'm listening to you. First of all, I know your bio, right? So where's the story going? It's going into your professional speaking career. And, I'm listening to your story about the military, and I'm going, of course he's going to become a professional speaker in my mind, because I'm listening to all of your experience. I'm listening to your leadership. I'm hearing all of the ways that you've led people and all this experience and all these great stories that you have. And I'm like, yeah, I could only imagine how successful he's going to be on stage because of all of this. And then you just shared this, which I didn't know because it's not in your bio here at all, about going through this transition. You did say that it was the most challenging, but we use this word challenge a lot, right? Like, challenge has so many different levels.
Very broad.
Yeah. Challenge. And meanwhile, here you are contemplating life because you're walking away from Master Sergeant. It brings up a few things for me in terms of questions. The one that's at the top of mind right now is just, in the military, first of all, there's a number. I just saw it yesterday because, again, I'm doing this county fair, and they have one of the military tents there set up, and they're selling T-shirts, and they're talking about a certain amount of people in the military commit suicide every single day. And so there's a huge number of people every single day committing suicide that come out of the military. This profession, this place that builds people up and take them out of environments, like you said, that were negative environments, and put them in a positive environment and teach them so many life skills and everything. And yet they're still, unfortunately, because of PTSD and all the other reasons, committing suicide. And so my question is, what does the military do in order to try to prepare you for civilian life? What do they do in order to try to help you through this transition, if any? And it's more of curiosity than it is judgment.
Sure. The Department of Labor has a program called the Transition Assistance Program, where there's these designated courses and timelines that you have to start asking yourself these questions preparing. And there's a whole sheet and a checklist of things you can do to kind of do that. There are some gaps in that program because I had to go to a lot of outside resources. I think there's a lot of more nonprofits that do a much better job than what this, TAPS program, the Transition Assistance Program, kind of has out there. But if anything else, if you were to take something away from that is to know that you need to ask questions and where can you go get those resources. I don't think they're ever going to be in a position where they're going to be able to check all the boxes so that way somebody can transition easier. And to this day, there was a nonprofit organization here in Colorado Springs, and they had a course called the Prep Connect 360. It just shut down, I think last year or this year, but it was one of the best courses because it really had me taking time to ask questions like, what were some of those great environments that I, felt that I excelled in? What did I like about some of those work environments I was at? What didn't I like about those? And really bringing those to my list. Like, those are factors that you should include when you make a decision. It's not just your skill sets. It's not just what your aptitudes are, or, what did this sheet the transition program uses. The Department of Labor has a program out there called like Bright Outlook, and you can look up different jobs and what are these categories of codes and take these assessments, aptitude tests, and it throws titles at you. If anything, I use that now as when I talk to another veteran that's transitioning, as use this only as a stepping stone. Like, go into these programs if you already have an ambition, but like click on the thing you're thinking about and then look at all the other job titles underneath it and then look at the skill sets. You can use that in planning to see if you have any gaps in your educational base and what you can do. But there's really not a whole lot going on with the TAPS program that met those. I still had a ton of questions. And if it wasn't for these other nonprofit veteran organizations, I don't know if I would have gotten those answers directly. Now, the TAPS program has changed from the time that I took it. I want to say like the year that I got out, they implemented a lot of change as far as when you sign up. They wanted people to start to be a little more proactive if they're thinking about it, to start this process sooner. And I think that's key. I had the luxury of being in a position that I was at to where I'm in charge of 17 people. I was going to, our board meetings, and I was reminding people, hey guys, I got 154 more wake ups. I hope you got my replacement. I wanted them to know that I am disconnecting. I was doing it a little, facetious. I wasn't the best, but I wanted people to know, like, I'm disconnecting. I'm not going to be the guy that's going to sit in here, work past my turn for free, or that my focus is on my transition. Now, I also feel for the younger enlisted that might not have that same opportunity. There's some positions, even in our office of command. So I think it was just I was in the right position at the time. But there's some people that, nope, you're going to show up to work every day and this is what you're going to do. These are your requirements. You're going to have to do that on your own time. And that's bad because there's a lot more questions that we don't even know to ask that don't get exposed unless you have the opportunity, like I did, to go to these other third-party sources and be exposed to that information. So when I was hearing, I started taking calls. There's a volunteer program that I'm with called Veterati. And with Veterati, you can sign up. And I'll say this for all the listeners. If anybody wants to help people develop, you can go and sign up and be a mentor on this program, and allows a transitioning veteran to schedule a call with you depending on your schedule, your availability, how much time you want to open up. And it takes out the cold call filling. Maybe if somebody wants to be a quality manager, they can go into this program, type in quality manager. It gives a list of name. They can click on your profile and schedule a meeting with you. And you have a 1-hour mentoring conversation. And I utilize that tool a lot. Was this helpful for you? Did this work? Because all those questions like, should I waste my time and energy on this, or where am I going to land up? And it's great because we don't know what questions to ask. So now that I do that, here's some things you can think about as you get ready for this next journey. And there's unfortunately a lot of people that have supervisors in the military chain of command that don't respect that or appreciate the difficulty that decision really comes with. And I think if that was more clear, so even though we set up these tools, or those tools may be available, whether it's furnished by the Department of Defense, Department of Labor, or nonprofit, I think the next thing is the leaders need to understand how difficult this change in this transition is, and then how much even more difficult. I had a 20-year career that I built. Well, what if somebody is getting out after 4 years, right? I mean, they got a lot more unknowns, or 6 years, or somebody that's leaving the service because of some disciplinary actions that, is an impromptu change. Those pivots aren't planned. I had time to plan my pivot. Not everybody does. So though even they need a lot more focus and attention, because you go out into the world. I mean, this is not going to be one of those scenarios where you just throw them in the deep end of the pool and see if they float, right? Some people don't always float in these situations. And it starts with the community needs to know how important this change is going to be, and to give them opportunities to use all the resources available, and even just giving them a sheet, like, here's some, like, go around, shop around, but take time, giving them time during the day to do it, which again, I had the luxury to do it. I would shut my door, say, nope, he's going to take in charge when I'm gone, go to him with these. And I served kind of like as a mentor that was in the house, but I was trying to disconnect as much as possible. And I feel for those that don't have that same luxury.
Which I think, yeah, but I also think that was helpful to that transition too, for in the military for that person taking over for you. Because I mean, how great is that? To have a mentor for that person. It's like literally exactly what you said you didn't get. And you got to be that person. You got to give them what you wish you had. So that's really, really cool that actually kind of happened that way. They may not have appreciated it because, they have their systems. But I think with what you were looking for, it's kind of funny how you actually ended up giving the military, giving that next master sergeant what you were looking for. It's kind of ironic how that worked out that way.
See, and Michael, this is why I like listening to your podcast already, because how in depth you listen, like you connected something that I didn't even connect, right? Like you're picking up these stories that I didn't even realize that, yes, there's this theme building. So thank you for, highlighting that for me, because you're great at it. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just really cool too that it happened. And I try to be here for my guests, man.
And our listeners, right?
And our listeners, that's right. Yeah. So you went through this moment now, and you're at the bottom of the list, and your daughters are there, and they keep you alive. And that's wonderful, right? Like, I mean, our family, sometimes when we're feeling, and I've gone through depressive moments too, where I remember asking my wife, I'm like, you never have suicidal thoughts? She's like, no. And I'm like, oh, I thought everybody did. Right. So we have those moments in our life. And so sometimes we are living for others. And I'm very happy that you had them on your list and that you're here with us today. So, but once we're past that of like, okay, I'm living for my daughters, I'm living for X, I'm living for others, and whatever it is, now we have to have a purpose. And so for you found a purpose, obviously, and I'm interested in how you started discovering and that purpose started unfolding for you.
Yeah, I think so. Right now, when I have written on my wall is that my job right now, everything that I'm doing is that way I can provide all the resources and opportunities to allow my girls to live their dreams or experience their dreams. And I think that just gave me this whole new thing that it's not just about me. There's something bigger. And I know, like I've shared before, and people are like, well, what about your spouse? What about your family? But I was like, that's just kind of my overall theme. That if I want that dream, I know that there's a lot of other micro tasks that I need to do it. So, and what does that mean to provide the opportunities and resources? Well, resources, what do I need to do to make sure that, one of my girls talks about how she wants to be a space scientist. Great. And if she changes next week and wants to be something else, I don't care what that is, but it's my job to be able to do what it takes to bring in the money, the education programs, so we go down, we're part of the Colorado Space Discovery Center. I take her down there so she can see some of those things, because I know that that's important to her and it's important to me. And by doing that, I also want to be able to be a good role model. If both of my kids one of them says she wants to be a vet, right? But she just calls it an animal doctor still. Okay, great. It's not about my opinions. It's not about where, what my thoughts are or anything like that. It's about, this is what they're enjoying right now. That's uncovering their personalities and what they value and what they find important today, and kind of still supporting that. But by doing that, I know that I have to, like I kind of alluded, I have to check off boxes. That means I need to make sure that I'm staying active. If I'm going to take the risk of being a business owner and trying to go out there and get clients and help them to be a better version of themselves, then this is what I got to do, because I also got to still be here and be supportive to my wife. Like, I'm not going to be able to help my kids fill their dreams if now they have to live in two separate homes, right? So that's important for me to make sure that I keep a healthy relationship, because that's part of my overall vision. Like, there's all these things that have to be tallied under that overarching strategy of where I am today, and just committing to it. And I will say there are times where I don't put in the level of effort that I need to, that I know that I need to take certain actions in this domain, because I still have that. I still hit fear. But it's also why I still have a coach to remind me that I needed to pick up, even though I know better, right? I know the rules of the game. I kind of coach others in the same manner. And there's at times I feel like a hypocrite because I know what I need to do. And then at the same time, it's like, okay, nope, I'm going to invest money in myself now. And I'm going to hire somebody to hold me accountable, because I'm not performing the way that I know I need to perform in this certain domain. And so it's also not a hypocrite in the fact that I'm not taking my own advice by getting a coach to do the exact same thing that I'm trying to coach another person, maybe in a different lane. But that vision right there is what kind of fuels my passion. And if it changes from now, maybe when they get older and, maybe now they're well success, I'll redirect it. Now, maybe my vision might be, I want to end my life the same way the movie Notebook did. I don't know, but I don't think I'll ever get that emotional because I'm not that in tuned, right? But it gives me permission to say that there's options on the table, and what are my behaviors, my actions, my thoughts going to do to support that endeavor for where I'm at today. So it was huge in guiding a lot of what I do. And in fact, when this goes into like me taking time out to look at my personal values. Another one of my personal values is legacy. And the reason that is the case, I have the discussion a lot of times when I help somebody like take the time to do a personal value exercise. You always see family on there. Okay, what behaviors do you have that support family as one of your values? Now, if I was to put family on mine, you might not see that blatantly because I will sacrifice work hours. I will stay at work 10 hours a day or do something late in the night. It's not saying that family is not important, but my behaviors are not indicating that family is one of the most important values in me. But now legacy is, because I want to build a legacy for my family. So if I hit a point to where now all of a sudden I feel like I could throttle back and spend more time and start making that transition, great. But right now I want to build that legacy, and my actions and my everything, all my behaviors are going to show me building legacy, because family is important, but it's not guiding my behaviors and my actions and my thoughts. Right. So it all plays into this overarching thing that I have now on it is, it helps me learn what to say yes and what to say no to. And just kind of committing to that. I haven't found the best way to communicate this with my children. They are still 4 and 6, but they still share their opinions and I support it. And it's good to kind of get into their mind, because if all of a sudden something they say influences my next decision, then it will influence my next decision. I will incorporate, I will think about it and see how I can adjust my strategy or my mission, this whole new self-purpose that I have.
It's always challenging with young children to be able to share our dreams with them, because they just want to play with us. That's really all they want.
It is.
But I think like young children and we were talking about family and old friends and everything. I think one of the things with what you just mentioned there about family is, and working and trying to build a legacy, is that things come in seasons, right? Is that sometimes it takes a season of working really, really hard and putting in extra hours in work, so that you can have a season where you can maybe work less and put extra time into family. And I think that that's part of the whole harmony versus balance, in that like life isn't balanced, but it can live in harmony when we're seeing that, things are cyclical, things happen, things change, and that's okay and that's good. And it kind of goes to that hypocrite feeling too. Like I was laughing when you were saying it, because I felt the same way. I was mentoring a young entrepreneur, and he asked me a question, and I kind of forget what it was. I remember us walking. We were walking on this. We have this beautiful rail trail, and we've made the decision to rather meet via Zoom, that we just kind of like meet midway for a hike or for a walk or for something, and it's been really cool. So I actually remember the spot we were on the rail trail. I just don't remember the question, but he asked it, and I'm like. And I'm answering him, and it's so weird because like imposter syndrome and hypocrite kind of like are almost the same thing. Of like I'm answering his question with the advice or with the thought that I have to help him, right? And as I'm saying it, I'm going, why am I not doing that in my business? Like I'm not taking my own advice here, and I'm just like feeling like a hypocrite. But then I'm realizing too that things happen when they're supposed to happen, and they happen in seasons. And like, while it might be the right time for him to implement this in his business, it's not necessarily the right time for me. And there's other factors. He's a young entrepreneur. He's 19 years old, and he doesn't have a family, he doesn't have kids, and he doesn't have to worry about certain things. And I do. And I'm doing different things than he is. I'm running different areas. So I can't implement those things right now, or I choose not to implement those things right now. But it has a season, because I know it's right. I know it's something I probably should, but it can come later on. And so I think that when we look at it that way, of like there's seasons for things, and my daughters right now, I'm telling them, I'm not getting home till late every night, but that's only for now, and I'm going to be able to do other things, and we're actually going away together next week, so we're going to see each other.
I think you're bringing up some valid points, if I may. I'm sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Is one of the things that I neglected to do, even though this was my mindset, this was my thought processes, right? What made things easier in the home was sharing those thoughts and processes with my wife. especially in the beginning ages, or in the beginning phases, I should say, there was a whole lot of me just trying to just drink from the fire hose, starting a business, what I want to do, and trying to get this, what are my offers, how I want to add value, how am I going to help? And I'm just bringing all this information in. And then she would ask me, she's like, what's going on? What did you do today? And I took that as an attack. Like, I am back there. Like, you don't understand what I'm going through, the questions that I have. Like, you have a job, you have all your prices out for you. Like, exactly. I don't, but I attacked her because I didn't know how to answer that question. But instead, like last night, I was like, hey, babe, look at this new mastermind I'm thinking about doing, and I show her the work. So now she sees what I'm thinking, or, what I'm kind of working on. And by having it, it's helped her, because now she knows I'm not just sitting here twiddling my thumbs, waiting, hey, when's the next paycheck? I now include her in what are some of those things that I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and what are those struggles and hardships that I'm having. And that has made it a little bit easier. Now, do we still have rough patches? Yeah, I still sometimes feel a personal attack, but that's only because I'm unhappy with myself. Like, I know that I could do more, and I'm misdirecting those emotions elsewhere because I'm embarrassed, or I'm not satisfied with my level of effort or where I am in that stage. And she asked me the question and made me vulnerable. And instead of just saying, I'm not doing the best because of X, Y, Z, I was like, why are you always in my crap? Like, that I'm sitting, so it's just an opening thing. And I think you mentioned as well, when you talk about how you communicate with the children, that there's got to be that communication piece is so pivotal in my conversations, and how that turns around, just with her understanding that, yes, she might not fully understand all the technicalities behind it, but she feels included. She's part of that journey. She wants to come along, and it helps that way. If I do have a heartache or I'm having a bad day, she kind of understands that I'm hitting these roadblocks, or whatever the situation is that I face at that moment. And again, that was something that took me a little while, because I chose to be defensive more than inclusive in my own home, which is, again, another weakness. The hat that I was wearing at work, the inclusive nature of everything, I wasn't quite wearing that same hat at home. I would take it off because I know I'm tired and exhausted. And again, another hypocrite mode. Why can't I be the same person, when I'm leading at work, that I am at home, and I'm just exhausted and I'm taking it out on the wrong people, right? Again, these are the people I want to live the rest of my life with, but I'm giving more energy and more dedication to at work. And again, I spend a lot of time there, or when I had an office job, but I don't forget the amount. Maybe I'm not spending as much time at home, but they have a greater impact on my overall future. So as all these epiphanies kind of happened on the importance of communication and making sure that you have the people that are in your journey, just give them the right information they need so they can still support you along that journey. Because especially for entrepreneurs, it's tough. You can be alone, and you have to find that right network, whether it is other entrepreneurs doing what you want to do, that they're going through the same thing, have already been successful and done it, or those that are just there to support you. You need all those people in your team. You don't need the naysayers. Occasionally it's good to read the hate that comes out there to fuel you every now and then, but you don't need those, because that's not going to get you to the next level. But you do need that support network that is going to keep you motivated and drive. Because when you lose focus or you have a bad day, it's very easy to take it out on yourself, when it's just a fact of living and a fact of business, right?
And it's huge awareness on your part there, to be able to see that that you were being defensive, and to change that. And I've experienced it, and so many of our listeners and everybody experiences this. Is when we feel like we're failing ourselves, and someone unintentionally calls it out, because it's not intentional sometimes. We have the tendency to be defensive. But, the other thing I heard you say in there is that you also realize to give yourself some grace, to forgive yourself in that moment, and to learn from it and move on and change and adapt to it. So, and obviously, and open up the doors of communication, which is huge. Something you mentioned earlier, which I'd like to go back to, is micro tasks, because, we have our core values, and typically it's anywhere from 3 to 4 core values is what you'll typically hear, or we'll have our vision boards, and we'll have a couple visions on there. And again, 3 to 4 is what we'll primarily talk about. But in that, people who don't really play in this space quite yet, or are learning about the space of vision boards and core values, may not understand what the micro tasks are inside of that. And I'd love if you can share a little bit about what that is, what it means to you, microtasks, and maybe where you learned it.
I think, starting off with where I learned it, I think it's been a combination of resources, between Grant Cardone, John Maxwell, Brendan Bouchard. I mean, these are all mentors that I read upon and kind of get some of those skills and techniques. The whole idea, and this is kind of interesting just in my entrepreneurial journey as well. I'll use the idea of when I was trying to define my market niche. Who is it that I want to help and serve? And what I was doing with this particular task is I was going straight to that question, like, man, who am I trying to serve? What's going on with this? And how do I want to offer? And it was a very, very tough question. And I think I still am modifying that as I grow. But what I actually had to do was step back from that very granular question and be like, okay, how do I want to help? And then by breaking this into a project, okay, how do I want to help it? I've expanded my niche, and then I'm like just talking, just like with this. And then as I'm doing that, people are coming to me and asking me questions, and I'm realizing that my niche is kind of finding me. And I was spending a whole lot of energy on really just one line item versus taking a step back and saying, how can I approach this overall thing? So say if my goal was going to be to find my market niche, I can take the time and realize that this isn't just, I don't have to eat this whole elephant type of thing. Like I just, the one bite at a time type of thing. How am I going to do this? Well, how about I just start with my communication strategy and my message? Let me start there. And I had another mentor that told me, hey, I know you can offer a lot of value, but here's what you need to focus on. What is the one thing that you want to be able to talk to somebody that will get them to come into your house and sit down on the couch and have a conversation with you? And then out of that conversation, you can be like, you know what? I know initially we were talking about how I can potentially help you in this way, but I think for this scenario, what I have behind door number 3. So if I have all these skill sets, which was a big part of my imposter syndrome, I love quality management, process improvement, leadership, communication. It gets really cloudy and muddy. If I want to break that down, I need to say, hey, what is that first step that I need to take that's going to lead to the next. And it makes it manageable, makes it more bite-sized. And I know like Grant Cardone's a big one. Don't focus on the how. Don't get so caught up in the weeds or a SMART goal is great. But initially just get something on paper, like this is what I want. I want to have a net worth of $20 million. Okay. I don't need to map that whole thing out right now, but I can ask myself question, okay, what do I need to do that? Then what do I need to do that? And then whatever it is the most feasible thing for me to do at that point in time, or that I can take action on. Maybe I shouldn't say feasible. I don't want to limit myself. What can I take action on right now that would bring me one step closer? Then do that. But if you don't take a step back, or if you continue to look at that big picture instead of breaking it down, then for me particularly, it gets to that overwhelm because it's such a huge task. I don't know where to start. And that's kind of where, if we are as a mentor, coach, or speaker, how can you let another person know, and even yourself, that this is manageable, that this is doable, that is not out of your reach? One of my phrases, I was like, don't ever self-eliminate. Don't cancel yourself out of a dream, out of a project, out of a job, anything. Go for it. And then let the process end up the way that it does. But it won't be because you just cross it off your list because it was intimidating. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of where it is. Taking that and breaking it down. If I want to have a marketing strategy, okay, just keep asking that question. In process improvement, there's the 5 why exercise, or Dean Graziosi has his 7 levels deep. It's the same thing. Is just ask those questions. How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? How am I going to do that? And as you break this down, you realize that it is doable. But if you look at that big picture and think that you're going to attack that head on, no war is won that way. Every war is strategized, and we're going to hit it on multiple fronts, different angles. We're going to put a few of my forces over here, a few of my forces over there, and then at the long-term objective is X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a huge step where I tend to forget some of these skills that I had learned in the military, how I was able to break down these projects. And then I come in here because everything was new, starting as an entrepreneur. I wanted to do it all. I wanted to get these checks. I wanted to do this. I paused to say, hey, I can do this. And what's going to be that first actionable step that I'm going to take that will ultimately lead here?
Yeah, sometimes we forget we have those tools in our tool belt. You mentioned Brendon Burchard, and I kind of want to bring him up. It's so funny. Like there's certain things that you've said here that I'm just like, are we the same person? First of all, I graduated high school in 2000 as well. Right.
Oh, all right.
And I went through a transition period of exactly what you mentioned, of smoking weed and not knowing what I'm doing and going like, I need to get out of this. Like, what am I doing here? Now, I didn't go to military path, but my father was Army. My father is a Vietnam vet in the Army, and then we both have speaking careers and Toastmasters, and Brendon Burchard and John Maxwell are also, and for me, Tony Robbins, mentors that from afar to me as well. So it's kind of funny that you bring him up, and I'm just like, man,
what's that movie? Did we just become best friends?
What is that movie? Yeah, I feel like I just heard that. But it's interesting. But I think it also it's tied into like the career that we've chosen in that of the speaking career. Is that some of the things. So I go back to Toastmasters for a second here because I wanted to bring this up with your military service. In that you talk about feedback and how you were checking the boxes and everything, and it's not just about checking the boxes, but it's also about like evaluate me. But it's not about just have at it. It's be constructive. And you and I are both Toastmasters, and we both know that Toastmasters are building the leaders of tomorrow. And you were just talking about that earlier in your military about like creating leaders, and that's what Toastmasters is in terms of communication. Is about we're building leaders through communication, and communication is providing feedback that's helping you, that's helping you grow. It's not just to point out your flaws, it's to maybe highlight your flaws, but providing more information that's going to help you overcome those flaws, that's going to help you change them, and providing the tools to be able to surpass those flaws into becoming more productive in what you're doing. So it's interesting that we're both Toastmasters in that. And then, of course, Brennan Burchard, as I was saying. So I'm part of something called Growth Day, which is Brennan Burchard's app, and I got it because of his book. And I was so inspired by it. And now I'm like, I'm in the Growth Day community. Like, I'm in it every single day. I listen to his daily fires every single day. I comment on people's posts. I actually got highlighted for one of my posts, which was really cool. I'm interested in your thoughts on Brennan Burchard and what you've learned from his guidance.
Yeah, so it was, I also do the Growth Day app and
cool.
His series of books that he has, specifically like high performance habits. And what I acknowledged from that is I was looking for a game plan on, I had the lack of clarity, which is one of the things that he covers or subjects he covers in his first book. But as I was reading it, I was identifying that these are a lot of effort. These are a lot of things that I have or characteristics that are already within me. But because I feel lost in my way, I just needed that map to put these down. So let me do these exercises and kind of go back through these. And a lot of his work is with like athletes and top CEOs. And one of the things that I've learned in my transition is that some career fields in the military, and just like Olympic athletes, like you train so hard at that one thing, now you got to pivot. But there was a lot of skills. Like for me to be a team leader within the explosive ordnance community, there was a lot of checkboxes and things that we had to learn and put our time to. And I look at everything, all the accomplishments that I did while I was active duty. I for some reason, I was separating myself from that entire hat, right? So I mentioned how that was my identity. At the same time, you mentioned before about my speaking community or career that I'm trying to build. There was a point, if I didn't have a mentor bring this out, that I was trying to separate everything from that. There was no talk. I didn't mention anything about being a bomb technician. I didn't have any stories about my military in there until he asked the question. It's like, why aren't you including any of that? Like, that's still part of your story. It's still part of who are you. But I think I was just trying to feel like I needed to completely start over, like the witness security program or something. I got a whole new identity. So I bring that up simply because these are all like between his advice and reading this book, I realized like there are skill sets that I could still transfer over. It's just not my identity anymore, but a lot of those things still kind of bring me to who I am. And how do I go through these steps of what routines do I need to set? What is important? How am I? Matter of fact, he has his, I think it's called the reset, right? How do you get your mind right before you go into a meeting? And as a coach, it's super important, or even as a mentor. Like, are you going to be able to separate yourself from whatever's going on in your life for this period of time? And how do you want to go into that situation? Because that right now it's all about adding value, and how am I going to do that? And I'll paint a scenario where I don't use that tool all the time, but I know when I need it. For example, it was 2.5 weeks ago, mother-in-law passed away. I was feeling a little sad about some of the things, mostly about how it impacted my wife. And we had a lot of things going on, but I still had a commitment that I needed to go. And I was able to kind of do this whole little exercises. How do I want to show up in this meeting? What I'm going to do? Write down what's the intent and what's the focus, and keep that at the forethought. Even though I had these other things going on in my mind and my body, like, how do I stay in this moment? Because right now it's not about me. I can have time for me later, but I need to really be here. And I think that was one of the tools, maybe not in that same method of being taught, but it's a tool that I was able to use for this scenario. So that way I can compartmentalize what I'm going through, because ultimately I still want to add value. And I think it's good here. And what's great is I'm a fast talker. He's a fast talker. So I'm trying to work on that, but I can see that there's still hope, because he seems like he, drinks a little bit more caffeine and everything. So it's great to see his personality on stage and how he goes, because there's a lot of similarities, but he's also have so much experience where it's like, that's pertinent. Like, that message was for me right now. And I think there's a lot of that I also want to contribute. Like, there's my stories, there's my experiences that if one person can hear, so that way they're not that same guy debating suicide on a chair, on a sofa, or whatever like that, right? Or if they're trying to, how do I start a business as a veteran? What do I do? Knowing that there are resources out there and I'll put this out there. Accountability is a huge topic. How do you hold yourself accountable? And there's many books on it, extreme accountability, all these different things as far as how do you hold accountability. But as much as I read this message, it wasn't until I read Jack Canfield's Success Principles. And in the beginning of this book, he has this formula called you have an event, you have your response, and you have your outcome. So whatever the event is that's thrown upon you, it is what it is. Sometimes you can control it. A lot of times you cannot, but that's the event. The outcome is, how did things turn out? So let's say you go and have a conversation with somebody and you get punched in the face. Well, how was your response? What did you do in the middle of that kind of made that outcome be what it is? You got in a car accident. Okay. Well, what things did you contribute that kind of enabled? Not saying take blame, but there are steps that were taken in that process. Were you late? Did you run on time? Did you take the wrong road? Or what could you do differently? If you didn't like the outcome, what can you do differently with your response? Because the only thing you can change is your thoughts, your behavior, your actions. Now, I've heard that message between multiple authors and speakers, but reading it from this one is when it registered with me. So there's a lot of things that people say where it finally clicks, like Grant Cardone. He says things that are so just blatant and just direct. It's like, that's what I needed to hear. There's a lot of things with Brendan, same thing. He says things that I've heard before, but it paints it in a story where it just clicks. I was like, that's what you mean by this. And I think that's kind of what I gained from all these different individuals and with Brendan's programs that he offers between it. Well, there's 3 books in general that I kind of was looking at, but the High Performance Habits was the one that I kind of highlighted and went back to and was doing exercises repeatedly over and over again, mostly because I wanted to gain clarity. There's a lot of steps in how do I do that and put my energy on what's important.
Yeah, I love everything that you just said there because it resonates with me too. Is like sometimes a lot of the books that we read, I'm saying we because you and I have read a lot of similar books. I didn't read Jack Canfield's, but a lot of similar books. And I don't like to reread a book, although I'll do it. I'm actually just in the process of rereading Ryan Serhant's book, but it's really only because I wasn't ready to buy a new book yet. I do them all through Audible, by the way. So I listen. I should get a sponsorship for Audible because I bring up Audible almost every podcast because that's where I read. So like Audible, if anybody works for Audible, I should get a freaking sponsorship for them for talking.
Sign
about
this
them.
Man up, Audible.
Seriously, I talk about it all the time. But the truth is like I just listen to them when sometimes I'm looking for a new one. But anyway, what I'm bringing up in these books is that typically I don't reread books. I'm looking for a new book. I'm looking for a new author, but they're all saying the same thing. And it's what you just said there is like hearing it from a different point of view, hearing it from a different story, hearing it from a different author is when sometimes it lands. Like there's certain things in one book that I got, and then I listen to another book and it's kind of like the same stuff, but I got different stuff from it. And it's just the way that that's why I think it's so important to have different mentors and different authors and different people in our environment, and it gives us so much more. I just heard this one, and this is a tip for you and for any listeners out there who want to become professional speakers. I've been watching this one guy on YouTube. His name is Vin, and I can't think of his last name, but he's an Australian speaking coach. He was at a conference, and somebody asked him, "How do I become a great storyteller like you are, Vin?" And he said, the issue that the mistake that most of us make is that every day there's a story that happens in our life. And we don't realize that, or, we just take it for granted. We don't write down that story, or we don't retell. Well, he didn't say this second part. I'm saying it. We don't retell that story. But he was talking about write down the stories that happen in your life. I mean, Brendan talks about journaling all the time, and so write down the stories that happen in your life and you were talking about this in terms of like your military background. Those stories are what fuel your next talk. I mean, you and I, we've been talking for over an hour now, and a lot of it has to do with our stories. Like I'm bringing up stories and you're bringing up stories. And in that, there's some learnings and some lessons. So, we pick up these little things, and I'm sure Brendan probably talked about it, like when he talks about journaling, but it didn't hit me the same way that it hit me with Vin, so it's very interesting. Going into your speaking career, because you're building a speaking career, you're coaching people, and don't you tell me that you went through IPEC coaching, did you?
I did not.
You did not? Okay, I was going to say that's too many similarities because I went through.
No, I did not.
I went through IPEC coaching. Is there one that you enjoyed going through?
I started through the John Maxwell Leadership Program.
Okay.
And initially I did that when I was still an employee, but I just was looking at it as a personal development program. But then they do have the coaching business lane you can kind of develop as well. So I use that as my foundation to get me started. But I think it was between hiring my own coaches and kind of learning my experiences where like, yes, this can be a career.
Yeah. And it's a great career. And so I'm interested in how you're building that career, the coaching career and the public speaking career. But while we're on the coaching side here, let's talk a little bit about that, because you have a coach. And you are coaching other individuals. And how are you finding new clients? How are you finding to bring value? I heard you say you were working on a mastermind. Could you share a little bit about that with us?
Yes. So the Veterati is actually one resource where I didn't intend on that to drive business, but I think because I offer the value for free, I give my time and I treat it as a paid session, and I give them their all. Sometimes they want to go maybe a little bit above the scope of a mentoring session. And that could be a decent way to transition of like, okay, because we still got to value our time, right? It's still important. So here's what I'm willing to do, kind of complementary to help your success and transition. But now if we're looking at this long-term career plan, we're looking more at a coaching thing. We're not looking at a specific incident or a specific event in your life. We're trying to look, here's a goal, a development plan we're trying to establish. So between that, word of mouth has been another thing. So I've been lacking on my LinkedIn, but I also remember that when I was getting out of the military, LinkedIn was the number one tool that I was using for all my criteria. Back then, I was really supporting project managers, other transitioning veterans, and I kind of stepped away from that. But now that I still reach out and talk to people on LinkedIn, and that has been a great tool, and because that's the community that I want. And I think the caveat to this is I stopped a lot of social media was simply because I didn't know who the heck I was talking to. Right? I was trying to get away from the veteran network because, again, I was separating myself from the military altogether. And I was like, I'm going to focus on leadership. But then a lot of people are coming to me on, starting a business. What do I do? What are the first steps? What is this? And I was like, man, that wasn't even on my roadmap. So it's like I'm making these adjustments because what are people coming to me naturally for? That like, if this is what people are knowing me for, then I just need to kind of get that message in. So I help out with some of the veteran organizations here in Colorado Springs. I like to talk and share information. A lot of it is word of mouth through, I'm with the Toastmasters group here, the National Speakers Association of Colorado, getting out to different networking events. Even if my wife has a company networking event, getting out there and just kind of sharing my story and getting people to know me. In fact, there's a workshop that I'm working on that is going to be a 6-hour workshop with, there's potential for a lot of good business, but that's my opportunity not only just to add significant amount of value to them, but also to demonstrate if they choose to do business or relationship with me, here's the type of person you're getting and the value, like here's my commitment. So it's kind of like a double whammy to take advantage of that opportunity to just really give them everything that they've asked for and more, but then establish, here's my character. And if you want to do even more or go even further, here how it is. Now, I know that I need to increase my social media campaigning. I need to increase some of these awareness things that I'm doing. So that way I can just get my message out there. And I feel a lot better about it because over the last few months, it was really that whole, what am I? When I first opened up a business, I called it Lewis Leadership Solutions. And then I still struggle with that because now I'm also, a Grant Cardone business coach. So I've adopted a lot of his sales and marketing practices, and I really like hone in on his sales strategies. So I didn't want to be kept in one lane. I don't want to be known just for leadership. So then I had this brand name crisis. So I was like, I'm just going to call it Ken L. Lewis LLC, and then I'll figure that out later, right? Like, I'll brand it later, but let me at least start having an LLC that I can not feel so intimidated by it, but I can, I guess I'll add value in one of these domains and come up with my messaging in that way. So it's been, and also random conversations with the most strangest people. It happened in an airport. There was sitting in one of the lounges. I heard a conversation, and that was just another way, like feeling confident in the value that I can add. And it was like, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I share a perspective of what I'm just hearing on this glimpse of your conversation? Sure. And to me, it was a communication issue. It's like, she's giving you a lot of great advice, like tons. You're being defensive. You're shutting everyone down. But I also think that you're a person that likes to share a lot of advice and needs a lot of facts, and you're a person that wants the bottom line out front. So perhaps, and they're like, this is exactly what we needed to hear, and that was a way for me to now exchange information to build a relationship. So I felt weird because I was given unsolicited advice, but I asked for permission and apologized, and they were open to it. And it was one of those things like, please take this constructively. I'm not trying to point a finger, just one perspective or observation. Take it if you want, don't. But I can't, I feel bad for her because she has a ton of ideas and they're not getting the limelight at all. But I think that speaks to my value of like open-mindedness. Give the opportunity, let the opportunity exist. My values are so like dead fast. I needed to inject and allow that, but it led to a conversation, to a relationship. And door-to-door salesman, like, man, can I help you with your pitch? Can I give you just one bit of advice? Like, I want you to succeed. I know how hard your job is. Can I just give you one thing? And whether they do business or not, it doesn't matter. Like, I would like to have that extended relationship, but if I can help them improve their situation, so now he can feed his wife and kids, great. I did my job. And if he wants to continue it, I'll help you do that even better. But a lot of it has been word of mouth, and then just, walking the talk with my message and being consistent in that. But I think also kind of getting, just helping people when I help, because it helps me at the same time. What it is I do want to do. I've learned very clearly of what I don't want to do. Sometimes I take on projects or, client, and I'm like, oh my God, this is not the relationship I want. And it's very clear, like, okay, I'm taking that off going back to my niche. I'll strike that as a no-go. I don't want that type of environment or relationship or whatever. So yeah, it's a start, but I do know the next step is really expand my social media presence and get that out there and just add value, continue to add value. And value is obviously, the eyes of the beholder. Like, is it going to help them better whatever problem they're facing at that point in time? And if they find something out of it, then maybe we can build a relationship and we can go further. But if not, hopefully you could take that one bit of advice and it made some type of change, whether it's minor or major, that you can apply and do the best with it, right?
Did you download Brendan's influencers roadmap?
I have the program. I signed up for it actually just last week. So I have initiated that program and getting ready to start that here soon. You recommending it, I guess? Or your suggestions, or was it worth it?
Well, I didn't do the entire program. I did the $10 download that he has. Like, you just pay $10.
Yeah.
I didn't do the full on, but I started watching and listening to some of the things that he's implementing and doing there. But I mean, just the little things opened up my mind. And, just the clarity, like you said, clarity it's huge. Like, when you don't know who you're speaking to, I do IG lives. I was doing them every day. I've kind of like teetered off a little bit from doing them every day. But, one of the things was, I was like, I'm not getting the traction I want. And my coach said to me, well, who are you speaking to? And I was like, I thought my audience. She's like, well, who's your audience? And I'm like, I don't know, so having that clarity is huge of like, who are you speaking to? Something I want to go back on in terms of like you finding clients and that you said there, that is like so huge. I was just in a what's it called? Masters Networks this morning. I was a guest to Masters Network, which is like a BNI, a chamber, one of those kinds of like networking groups. And, the tip of the day was offering value and giving and all this other stuff. And my feedback, because they asked everybody for feedback. My feedback was that, because somebody was a little concerned. They said, I'm just worried about that I give away too much and that, no one's buying from me because I give away too much. And so therefore my feedback to that was, when you look at thought leaders, when you look at people out there who are thought leaders, who are true influencers. And I'm not talking about the influencers who are out there just making, TikTok videos and dancing. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I think that they're also influencing a certain type of mindset, which is also wonderful and creative. But what I'm talking about is the influencers and the thought leaders that are maybe teaching us something in our industry of maybe it's becoming an entrepreneur, maybe it's starting a business, maybe it's climbing the corporate ladder, maybe it's being in the military. I'm talking about these thought leaders that are out there. When you look at them and how they influence others, or like Brendan, they give away everything. They give away everything. Like, the way I was introduced to Brendan was through one of his free books in Audible. It was a free book. It was The 6 Habits. And I was just like, I was in that transition mode again of like, I don't know which book I want to buy. And this one was free. And I was like, it kind of speaks to what I want to learn right now. And I was like, it's free, so why not, right? So I started listening to it. Next thing you know, what did I buy? I bought the Growth Day app, and it wasn't, I mean, he sells it throughout the book, which, but he does it in a very subtle way, which is nothing wrong with it because it wasn't overly, but the point is that he gave that book away. Right? He gives away his talks. You could watch his talks on YouTube. You could listen to what he has to say. So many thought leaders, they give away, and that's how you end up purchasing. And so, with what you're doing with Veterosity and what you're doing in the community and sharing and giving and giving and giving, it's only bound to give back. And, Deepak Chopra talks about that, is that you can't, there's going to be a balance. You're going to give away so much, and you have to get it back in return. Just like if you take so much, you're going to have to give so much in return. You're going to pay for all of that you take. So I think it's just a wonderful way of building your business the way that you're doing it. And the other thing I want to make sure I highlight here is that you asked for permission when you gave that advice. So often we make the mistake of just giving advice. It's important to ask and say, hey, are you willing to receive this advice right now? Do you want to hear my opinion on this? I think because that's going to set it up for them to want to listen.
Especially as an eavesdropper, right? Like I had no right to that conversation. I kind of help it, but yeah.
Hey, look,
it's common ground. Bring that connect first.
Hey, look, you're out in public, right? I mean, right? it's you're not. They didn't have a closed door that you had your ear to.
Exactly.
So you're also building a speaking business, which I think is important to highlight here because the two kind of go together somewhat. And in this speaking business, you're part of Toastmasters, which is obviously improving your stage presence, improving your grammar of being able to speak eloquently and speak professionally and be polished. You're also part of the NSA, and that's the National Speakers Association. What other things are you doing right now to build the speaker business? And what is your advice for new speakers trying to book stages, right? And speaking from wanting to learn myself right here.
Yeah. Those are big ones already. The other one is I also am a member for the automated program eSpeakers. So I do use eSpeakers that, as a Toastmaster, you can get a little check mark on there saying, hey, I'm a member of Toastmasters or I'm a member of Maxwell Leadership. So there's that, which gives me an opportunity to at least look up leads or look up events that are in my area or areas that I'm willing to travel to that kind of fall in the domain or industry that I want to speak to or on. I'm also a member of the 10X Stage Agency. So it's an organization that does also help to, how do I find opportunities and land those opportunities? So it's about getting those resources. So all these things are investments. So there's nothing like you don't just kind of wait around. Like, are you going to go, what are you going to do to invest in yourself to land these opportunities and kind of make them present? Then again, with the private organizations here locally, reaching out to them, just letting them know, like, if you have a backup speaker, I'm here. Like, this is kind of the things. Now, the caveat, or I should say kind of like a asterisk to that is, one of my goals is I do want to earn the certification to be a CSP or certified speaker professional through the NSA, National Speakers Association. They have a certification, which requires so many hours in logging of speaking events. They must be paid events and so forth. So I know that some of these things I'm offering myself for is to be a free speaker, but I need to get my reps in. So it kind of, in the beginning, I don't care as much as what is that initial cost, but can I demonstrate that I'm adding value? What is the feedback, and how can I continuously improve myself, whether it's with a local nonprofit organization or private organization. And even with, like, I live in a community with 5 military installations, reaching out to those development centers, like, hey, I'm willing to speak on this subject, and kind of just stay in there, but you got to stay front of mind. Like, how is your follow-up game? Are you making sure that you're reaching out occasionally and saying, hey, has anything come up? Because these are the same event planners or meeting planners that probably get bombarded with that all the time. And if I say just speaking on leadership, I'm sure they get hundreds of those. How do I stay front of mind? So knowing whatever it is you're doing, that you got to stand out compared to all the other people that are doing exactly what you're doing. I focus a lot here locally, and I want to expand that. But I think a lot of that is also maybe I'll call it a fear factor, but I really wanted to practice that messaging a lot more and get in some stages. I had a mentor say, try the same talk 100 times. And now what she does is, like, that initial talk she did 100 times in the beginning is the opening story to her new keynote, right? She shares that experience of how she did this one 45-minute keynote, which now is a 5-minute opening story for her, but it's experience. But she was able to go in there, get what stories work, what don't work, and just kind of keep expanding on it. So I think just finding a stage, whatever size it is, and getting out there and practicing and getting that talk, but also making sure you have a mechanism. There's another software tool out there called Talk-A-Dot. It's all one word. And with Talk-A-Dot, you can incorporate that into your presentation slide and try to solicit feedback, get testimonials right from the stage that you're on. And that could be another way where, like, hey, what am I doing that is working well, that resonated well, so I can do more of that? What did you not like so well, so that way I can improve it or eliminate it or whatever that is? But again, all about feedback. First of all, making sure you can negotiate that you can do that from stage, but how do I get that feedback? Because the whole point of giving the same talk 100 times is I need to improve it to make sure it's resonating. Is my message resonating? And I think that's key to allow yourself to have a tool to do that for you. So local organizations, the Chamber of Commerce has been good. And then for me, because I want to hit more veterans, reaching out and staying top of mind to these local veteran organizations. And then podcasts like this, getting out there, being a guest, hosting your own, I think is always a great opportunity because you get to practice your message. Just from Toastmasters, one of my weaknesses is I say right a lot. And when I say it at the end of a sentence here, I'm making a little check, like, did it again. I'm self-aware. It's not that bad, but I want to eliminate that from my speech because I'm saying it's a crutch word for me. But that's something that's been brought to my attention through Toastmasters. And as I get on these stages, whether it's a podcast or an actual physical stage, I hear it a lot of times after the fact, but it's bringing it to my attention that, okay, this is why somebody said you say it too much. So I think there's more things that's going to come to light the more you get out and just speak and share your message, whatever that is. And sometimes, as in my case, I kind of repurpose my message because I realized that people wanted me to elaborate more on one thing and less on another. And okay, it's not about me. It's not about what I want to talk about. It's what's the impact that I want to have. And am I getting through to them? And if I'm not getting through to them, then it's not like I really want to share this story or this main point. If they're not going to resonate or take it home, then it's mute anyway. Right. So I think I just did it again. I don't know if you heard the right of the check. But
I will say this caveat for Toastmasters. I've been a Toastmaster for 6 years, and I love the organization. I think it has really great values, and the way that they teach us how to speak professionally, I think is fantastic. But I think just like with anything, there's a structure, but there also is room outside of the structure. So I think the biggest mistake that people make when they become Toastmasters or when they learn from Toastmasters is that they criticize themselves too much and they go, oh, I can't say I can't say right, I can't say. It's not that. It's to be conscious of it. It's to be aware that you're saying those things and to try to minimize them, of course, because you will sound more polished. But when you just said it right now, because it's so part of you and it's not highlighted. So no, I didn't realize that you said it. But as Toastmasters, we are listening for that because we're trying to help the speaker eliminate it. So we're trying to listen for it. We're counting how many they're doing. And so I always, whenever I'm coaching or mentoring somebody in Toastmaster, I always let them know, hey, that's just for you to know and to be aware of so that you can maybe reduce it. But it doesn't mean that you have to speak perfectly, eloquently all the time. And I think there is some truth to that. And it tees up my next question that I had for you while you were talking, which is about adapting to your environment and being able to be real with your environment and not sound scripted. And so the question that comes up, and you kind of talked about it with doing 100 talks, is being scripted or not scripted, and what do you do when you do have a script? So when you are doing 100 talks, to be able to adapt to your audience, so that like maybe you are sharing a story that you're doing this 100 talk set thing, and halfway through you're seeing it's not resonating with your audience. How do you flip the script there?
So that's awesome because just my last talk that I gave was one of those to where I realized kind of reading the room that I was kind of disengaging. So I ended up bringing in a military story, which I typically didn't. And then at the end of it, I found out that story resonated the most. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something I had in there, but it kind of felt the theme. And I was like, okay, I can use this. I was speaking about the importance of culture and building a supportive culture. And I was referring to at the time that I had the differences on how my perception of an event that happened while I was in Afghanistan, how my perception was at the time, what is that? That's stupid. For example, this one was, I saw a bus, right? 42 passenger bus, had a car, had a little van on top, and luggage was packed like this little pyramid on top of it. I was like, from my American perspective, why are you doing that? Like, that is so unsafe. It's dangerous, But I was looking at it from the lens of somebody that grew up in America where the rules and regulations dictated my perception at the time. But for that environment, it was completely normal because there was 100 more buses that were doing that every day. So if I would have looked at it from the lens of the environment that I was no longer in, except for the environment that I was in, then I would have thought that was something wrong and would have never entertained that idea. So that's where kind of like our biases come in. And that just kind of popped in. And when that story actually resonated the most, because it benefited me because I was the most enthusiastic. Like I was given a visual that played along with it. So I didn't have it really written in my initial practicing and speech, but it flowed in and it worked out better. And from that, I could see the engagement. But I think that's a key thing is, are people starting to, go, what are their faces doing? Are they still locked in? Are they thinking? And using that story at the time, I think it clicked because I was talking about Afghanistan. Where is this going to go? There's a little bit of suspense because I kind of led up to it. And then people couldn't believe, like, we're not going to believe this in America. Like, who's going to put a car on top of a bus? Like, imagine a Greyhound going, there's a car on top of it, right? So I don't know. I think it's
actually, I thought I misheard you. So it was like literally a car on top of the bus.
Yes, a car and a minivan. There was a car and a minivan. And then so there's like a base of luggage, a car and a minivan on top of that luggage, and then more luggage. Just literally a pyramid. But it was common to see a couple cars, 1 to 2 cars on top of. I mean, of course, I have questions. How they get up there? How are you going to get off? Like what? Like
I know,
what's going on? I've never
picturing
seen the process.
I'm picturing a bus pulling into a depot, like backing in, and there's like this maybe thing that drives on, because I can't imagine a crane be picking these things up. So
they have cranes, but it's possible,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
I never saw the process of it, it being loaded, unloaded, but I saw it.
You saw it
frequently,
exactly.
both in Iraq and Afghanistan. But the tools they had, right? There was no regulations that stopped them. Is what it is. But I think the thing is, you alluded to this earlier about having stories in there. It wasn't my first time talking about that. I've used that story before in another talk. So I do have an Excel document and it's labeled stories, and I have humor. Right? I do have leadership. I have sales. So I have these different things, and I've used the same story multiple times depending on what I want to extract as the main point. And I've said this just yesterday. I was coaching somebody on an interview process. Like, yeah, have these stories in mind. And I gave the example of how I had this one project where we had to dispose of 18,000 pounds of explosives. And then I had this little sheet that I use by Sharon Armstrong, 100 behavioral interview questions. And I was like, okay, let's pick one, ask me one. And then I was able to use that same event to answer most of those questions. But I had it, what lens am I using when I answer this question? So I think the same thing can go as you're building your stories up, that you have this arsenal, that you've given it before. So if you do need to pivot, that it's something that you've already kind of, where it's going to go, or what the point is and where it's coming from, and kind of share that experience. But I will also say, for example, I've not talked about my high school years. So you asked that question, went down that story. So it's a reminder, like, I can now incorporate these stories into my future because it is a part of who I am. And maybe I haven't went down that path before, but it is part of my journey, and it's going to resonate with somebody else that has a similar journey to that. And the whole point of the story is to connect on that common ground. Why should I listen to you? Like, how are you like me? And how are you going to help me improve? Because I've been you. I've been there. I'm still kind of like you. I'm just one step further, and the stories really are what help make that message and hopefully resonate, right? That's the whole objective, is I want to inspire action. And I can only do that if I connect with you. So it's just kind of recapping on your importance of having that arsenal of stories built.
I learned from a guest recently, and it's kind of making me dig deep too, and maybe be even more vulnerable than I already am, because I feel like I share a lot about my personal life. But I just had a guest on, and she just talked about how she was speaking and doing all her talks, but was leaving one really vulnerable piece out. And when she was told, hey, look, do you realize that this happened in your life? And she was like, oh, and she connected to it. And she started sharing it, and very small, and then started really sharing it. It was like it changed her whole speaking career because of what you just said, that it resonated with others, and they were able to say, like, oh yeah, I'm experiencing that too. And look at where you are today, right? It's kind of like one of those things.
Don't be ashamed. Like, I could not speak about my suicide story for the longest time because it brought tears. Like, I did choke up even while sharing it, but I think that's the difference about using it by just facing it and owning it, is that hopefully there comes a day to where it doesn't even make me choke up. It's just part of my story. But there's still an emotional attachment to it, right? Because the thought of not being there for my kids, like the reason that I didn't do it, it still has an emotional impact on me now. But if you would have asked me this a year ago or a year and a half ago, there's no way I was getting to that story without crying or tearing. I mean, there's another story that I have, a combat situation that I was in. I had a team member saying, hey, we got this younger generation, haven't been deployed, haven't been in an environment. I don't think they understand the importance of what it is we're training them and what we're doing. And this is probably the most vulnerable I've ever been in my life. Is I ended up giving, a classified presentation on an event that happened while I was deployed in Afghanistan that did evolve into loss of life. And it was one of like the first experiences that I had. And I could barely make it through that whole discussion. I was crying my ass off, right? I was just, oh my God, what's going on? But I did that because somebody came to me that there was a problem with the training, that people weren't resonating. And I wanted to stress the importance of this. I wanted to see the effect that it had on me, because how much guilt I had that I feel I didn't do my job right. Now, through counseling, I realized it wasn't me. I didn't set it up, right? But I had to work through that. But it was that period of vulnerability where, like, I need you guys to understand why this is important, what we're doing, what we're saying. Like, this 19-year-old lost his life could I have changed it? There's something, yeah, whatever. But this is why it's important, because if we don't do it, if we're not great at our job, there's loss of life. But that period of vulnerability was my whole reason, was to connect, to stress the point. I still will, tear up when I share a story. And obviously I'm leaving out facts that aren't going to be so touching, but there's a point that I want to get to where I can say that and not even have to coach, because the impact that I want to leave is the basis of that story. Right? It makes it like, this is why this is important. This is what you're doing. Why is it critical that we do X, Y, Z? Maybe one day I'll get to a point, the importance of communication and everything else. Like I can analyze that story a little bit deeper and pull out life lessons from it. I'm not there yet, but the more you talk about it, the easier those stories can come, and the more you can kind of give yourself permission to be vulnerable and kind of, hey, what are the takeaways from this particular story in my life, right?
Yeah, and I think I think there's two sides to what you're saying there in terms of the emotional side. I think for us as speakers, it's draining to cry, and it's draining to tap into that emotion unintentionally. I'm not talking about intentionally. It's draining to have that feeling, but I do think that it leaves an impact too, because your audience and the people connect to that, right? Like, I mean, people get emotional here. I get emotional here. I've cried on my podcast here. And there's that moment of silence that happens on the air, and I always try to cover up for it very quickly. But I also think that it's because it's a real emotion, and when we're speaking, it's about connecting. And I hope our listeners, I would love some feedback on this from all of you, is that it's about connecting, right? It's not about really everything that we're saying. It's really more about how are we making you feel? How are we connecting with you? And I think you being emotional, me being emotional, a speaker being emotional on stage is a real connection, because we're really feeling that it's not fake, as long as it's not fake, right? So I think that there's that side, right? On the other side of it, you had mentioned it earlier with Brendan about like, how am I showing up, right? And who am I showing up for? And so in the situation that you just mentioned there, you were showing up for these new recruits and that didn't feel it. And I think that, and you just said it too, of like, I want to show them how it impacted me. And so therefore you were emotional. And I think that when we're as speakers, as coaches, as leaders, as whatever we are, parents, how am I showing up, and who am I showing up for, can also change the way that we show up. Because if I'm showing up to show you how it's emotionally impacted me, then maybe I'm crying. But if I'm showing up to teach you something from that story, then maybe I'm not crying in that situation, right? It's how am I showing up? So I think that that's like such a big takeaway that Brendan shares. And while I'm on Brendan, just for 1 second, because I do have a question for you about your stories. The other one I love from him is that you are stronger than you think. I love that quote, and I had to, while we were talking about Brendan, I had to say it because that quote's gotten me through a lot of when I hear him say, you are stronger than you think in his daily fires. I'm like, yeah, I am stronger than I think.
We're resilient beings, and I think if you underestimate that, then you're kind of limiting your own potential, right? So don't self-eliminate. But I think I think that also alludes to, you might not doesn't mean you have to do it by yourself. Right? Strength doesn't have to come just from with you. You can strength, but how you do anything in life doesn't mean you need to have just your strength, but you could find the strength. And sometimes it says a strong act of being vulnerable for a minute. So it's all inclusive, but I don't think that means you have to do it alone, or you have to persevere by yourself. You could find strength from different sources, wherever that may drive you.
I was just doing the county, as I bring up the county fair because it's like this week and it's like so intense, so many things going on. But I was like a little bit late getting set up, and this older woman offered to help me. And I said, no, I got it. And she goes, no, I want to help you. And I said, okay, here's some light boxes. So she starts moving them, and I got all done. And she said, thank you to me. And I'm like, huh? And I said, well, I mean, thank you, but you're welcome. What for? And she goes, thank you for not being a man and allowing me to help you get unpacked. And I was like, wow, you're welcome. Cool. I was like, but she was like, that was being vulnerable. Like, that's being vulnerable of like, I got it. I can carry these boxes. Yeah. But
that's impressive. That's a story to put on your little story sheet, right? Because there's so many lessons that can come out of that too. Just being able to fight stereotypes. I mean, there's many things that come out of just that one story that you lived that can resonate.
Yeah. And so great, because that's what I want to ask you about writing the story. So I find that whenever I try to write down my stories, then I start getting too, let's say, grammatically correct. And I ruin my story because I'm like, and then I went down and I asked her for help and she gave me help. You know what I mean? And I'm like, that's not how it went down. How do you go about writing your stories of experiences?
I think it really has to focus, like, what is the intent behind the story? Like, what am I trying to drive? You don't need to set it a whole lot, but I set the stage. I like to say, hey, set the stage. I want to know that you know kind of what was going on at the time. If I'm telling you the stories, because I want you to take away maybe the hard part of this story. Like, this is the adversity that I faced and what I had to do to overcome that. So let's say if I was to go back and discuss a little bit about my thoughts about suicide, I'm not going to focus. And I'll caveat real fast as a little disclaimer. If you're going to use an emotional story, make sure that it's strategically placed in your whole talk. If you do it too late, you don't want people to leave on a sad note. So give you time to recover. Like, do that early on, so that way people aren't left with this whole depressing. Keep it short, keep it to the point, but then end on a strong note, because you don't want the last thing to remember is this guilt or, oh my God, I came here to get motivated and now I just feel like I need counseling. And to capitalize on that too, is make sure that if you're using it, you're doing it to motivate and not manipulate. I am not a fan of people that are trying to use a story for the purposes of doing something unethical or illegal or immoral that is going to drive an audience to a particular result, because you only care about the end result being self-serving. So if you're going to use a story, hopefully it's a story that is going to motivate a certain outcome or a certain action, and it's not for some self-driven ego purpose, right? So that's kind of like I wish I'm kind of a little more passionate about that, because I really won't. That's our job as speakers or people that has a message. We want to motivate, don't manipulate, and they're going to know. So that would be my two advice. But when you're kind of getting vulnerable, what I want to be able to resonate to show that, yes, here's my story. I was at home sitting in my chair, and this is the period I had because I was facing this transition. I didn't know my life purpose. I don't want to really expand on it too much, but what is the bare minimum that they need to know so that way they can get it? If I go too deep in the story, too deep in the weeds, and it's okay, how do people learn? There's different communication styles, different learning styles. I need to try to find a common ground that is going to kind of attribute to all of them, but not go overboard. Me, I deal with brief and direct conversation. I don't need the whole story, but I just need the gist out of it, right? Where are we going to focus at? So I'll talk about this, and then how did I recover? Because the whole point of that story is like, there is a way out. Like, I didn't do this, and I am where I am today because these are the steps that I take, and that's where I want you to go too. Was there a lot more to that story? Yes, but nobody's going to want to hear about how much counseling I went to. You know, where did I pull my gun from? What beer was I drinking? Like, all that doesn't add value to the story. The fact that I was sitting there even thinking about it is the important part of that. Like, I got to that point. I've had all these questions in these periods that led me to a point to where I was contemplating life. Then, I went to this checklist and I thought about my little two girls. And from there, I knew I needed to change my whole story, right? Like, I had to rewrite everything. So I don't want to bring them down a bad path, and I don't want to kind of hover it, because the story is it's kind of like the structure should be. You have your main point. What is it that I want to bring? And then do you have one or two stories that's going to drive that main teaching point home that you want? So if I'm sharing the stories, because there's a message in there that I want to really relay, and that's just a vehicle to capitalize on what it is I'm trying to emphasize at that point. And if I'm using the wrong story, that's not. And another phrase, right? And 10X stages, one of the phrases they use is, it's not your story, it's our story. You want to be able to have a story that people can understand and relate. No, maybe not everybody was going to be on there and thinking about suicide, but there's a high chance that everybody has faced somebody that, has known somebody that has committed suicide, or been in a situation, or supported somebody that's dealing with it. They can relate to that moment. You don't want to do for example, in Toastmasters, they always say, open with a question. And this happened during one of the things where they opened a question, like, how many of you guys been to Greece? What do you feel about that? Well, my feedback at the time was, I felt excluded because I'd never been to Greece. I haven't been that. Like, were you talking to me? Was I right your audience? So how do you change that story to where now I don't feel excluded, but I feel included? And that is a commonality or common ground that I can at least understand. I don't want to feel like I'm being segregated from your conversation, but I don't want to be bombarded with information that's not going to drive home. My focus is to drive home the main point. How can I do that in a way that is going to connect with their heart, in a way that emotions I can tug on those heartstrings just a little bit, but enough to where I can resonate back to the main point. This is why XYZ is important. So brevity is great. And as practice, that story has definitely shrunk over the years and I can't even say years because it hasn't been that long, but I should say over the times that I've given it, of what I focus and what is it I'm extracting, because it is being really vulnerable for me, but they don't need to know all those steps. Just, this is why it's important, because I've been down so dark that these are steps I had to do so that way I can get in the light again, right? So I don't know if that helps. I don't think it was a specific advice other than what is the main impact you're trying to make, and how can you do it with the fewest words possible, and you're not writing a novel. You just only have a little bit of time to get that message out.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I do. I get into the weeds when I start telling, because I start writing my story, and I'm like, that is not how I would tell it. So I appreciate you sharing that, and for all of our aspiring speakers out there, that's huge. And and I'll share this for everybody, because I just said our aspiring speakers, but all of you listening, I look at you as all business leaders and entrepreneurs and people trying to change the world and community leaders. You all have a story to tell. Everybody has a story to tell, and your story is important, and it needs to be heard, and you need to be able to share it. And so I'm going to give a little, what's it called? What is it called?
Like a tidbit,
no
snapshot.
Oh my goodness. I'm drawing a blank here, but I'm giving a shout out to Toastmasters is what I'm trying to say here. Of like, I'm not sponsored by Toastmasters either. I'm getting a lot of like unsolicited sponsorships here. But like,
yeah, right.
But like, seriously, everybody should be involved in some sort of like speaking program to be able to help communicate a message. And you're going to have brain farts like I just did, but you're able to articulate and communicate a message and share your story, because it is important. You definitely have a book in you. I know it.
I need to. It's on my radar. One thing I'll add about the Toastmasters is, I'm mentoring a new guy there too, and he's worried about the structure and all that. I was like, no, the first step is get behind the stage. Like, just do it, and then we'll worry. Like, then we can start coming up with some plans. Like, how do you want to improve? But it's important to know with any, development tool that you use in your life, whatever phase, is know when that resource or that connection is no longer adding the value that you desire. Sometimes you need to find another tool, another resource, or elevate your game. So if, for me, Toastmasters is still in my future, it is still adding value and it's aligned with my goals, but it's something I need to be aware about. Is it, if it's not contributing to where I want to be, then know when it's time to move on or eliminate or whatever that next step is. So don't, the loyalty only goes so far. Don't buy this product and say, I have to stay here for the rest of my life. No, know when you have exhausted the resources and it's time to find the next best thing for whatever your next venture is in life.
That's right. This has been like so awesome having you on here today. It's been really cool to have so many similarities with you as a guest, and us just meeting for the first time, and yet still having so much of similarities there. But then, of course, huge differences with your military background, your military experience, some of the things that you've gone through in life, and you being able to share all of that with us today. I really have appreciated that. On just like a little bit of a different subject here, I know that you have your mantra in here, and I think we've talked a lot about it. And actually, why don't we stay here for a second? But I do want to ask you about some of the fun things that you would get to enjoy with your family before we get into your mantra. What are some of the fun experiences that you've had recently with them that you could share with our audience here, of like just things outside of speaking, outside of military, outside of all the other stuff, just day to day?
Yeah, well, I can say that we're going on. I know you said you got a couple weeks you're going on yours. My wife and our family, we're going to go up to the mountains here this weekend and kind of just escape and get away and do a reset and bring our paddle boards and kites. So kids want to do some kites. So we're going to break away. It's something I don't do nearly as enough, but it is on my map that I need to do something with the family at least once a month. Yeah. So it's getting out there, and importance of communicating goals. My wife knows that, so she definitely holds me accountable to that. Right. So that's the thing. But a lot of it really, I focus heavily on bringing the kids to different environments. If there's some kind of fair, there's something that we just went to, a circus show that was playing in Denver, and my 4-year-old goes, "Dad, this is the bestest surprise ever." Like, I want to remember that for a long time, because she doesn't really say that phrase a lot. So I'm glad she enjoyed the heck out of that, and that opportunity presented itself when we took advantage of that. And that's something that I knew that it was important enough where I needed to write it up on my chart of goals. I needed to do more of these activities. So beforehand, 6 months ago, not enough. It just was not happening enough. But now it's a goal that I know I need to do this, because, man, they're growing fast. So it's really getting out there and just finding these different opportunities to spend some time at the Space Center. And I take my little girl to this little playhouse so she can pretend to be a vet, and it's just like her doing this. And I haven't got to the phase. We're not putting makeup on and stuff like that, but I fear it's going to happen one of these days where I'm going to wake up with a bunch of painted toenails and eyelashes.
That's right.
But if that happens, so be it. I think it's still about those memories that we established. And I have to thank my wife for it all, because if it was just me, I would fall victim of not being to do this, because my brain doesn't always think in that, but she's all about trying to create these memories. And I have to remember to pause and, allow those conversations to happen and be like, okay, yeah, let's do it. Like this trip this weekend, she thought about it yesterday, and I was like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of pausing it to really get, what are your values? What's important? And that's important right now.
That's awesome. I have ended up with makeup on. I have 2 girls. So that's Den 10, Denise and Tenley.
Yeah.
I've ended up with makeup on. And I love that you just brought that up about the space. You said the space center for your daughter because, and also the circus, because we don't realize it as adults on the impact that it has on them. And you talk about different lenses, like seeing things from a different lens. They have a completely different lens. Like we just got back from Disney a little while ago, and my wife meticulously planned out Disney. We went to Magic Kingdom and we went to the Animal Kingdom, and she had every ride planned out exactly when to go. She looked at the schedules of like all the Facebook app and all the other stuff of like the Disney app and the Facebook and when to go, right? And it was meticulously planned, but like spur of the moment, not spur of the moment, kind of planned, but not really. We went to the NASA. The Kennedy Space Center because it was like right there, and it was like, oh, cool, and there's going to be a rocket launch. Oh, cool. So we went, and because we didn't plan it out, we ended up becoming like we ended up following the herds of where they were going. So we ended up last for everything. And as adults, we were like, oh man, this stinks. Like we didn't get to go to see the 3D movie. We didn't really get up front to see the rocket launch. We didn't really get to go experience this. And so as adults, we were like, well, NASA was a bust. And we got back and we're talking with family and we're just like, oh yeah, this was awesome. We did this at the Magic Kingdom and this and that. And we're like, Tenley, what was your favorite experience? He goes, oh, seeing the rocket launch. Like what? Like for us, we were like, it was behind the trees. Like we could kind of see it. Like, but for her, that was one of the coolest experiences. So we just never know through the lens of a child the experience that they may have.
You know what? You mentioned that whole planning thing too. Like I'm being vulnerable to my wife just because I need to plan things out. I don't do very well with the impromptu things. And when she first mentioned it, my heart went 100 miles an hour and I just wanted to say, no, not doing it. And I was like, okay, babe, let's try it, and we're going to go for it. But I am that same type that your wife, where I do want to plan things out, and it took everything. But again, because that was our goal and we haven't met it yet. So I knew that the bigger commitment was this, and I had to set that aside, even though that thought is kind of tough to put up with. But I think you also pay another thing is that, look, you were disappointed potentially, or sometimes we set expectations because we know what's available or the resources versus kind of living in the moment for what it is. And I'm guilty of this all the time. Like I'm not being present. Brendan Burchard talked about be present. Where are you for that moment? And it's very hard because you know what all the possibilities and what's available to you, and you didn't get to check off all these boxes. But if you just pause, be present, enjoy what is available to you, what you do have control over, and then maybe the perspectives do change. And again, that's like easier said than done. I know, especially for me, but I didn't make that connection until as you were speaking. I was like, I'm guilty of that. I'm always looking at the to-do list or how much can we fit in a day versus just my wife absolutely just wants the moment and the experience. Mm-hmm. And I think we can all benefit if we tried that a little bit more.
Yeah. The moment and the experience is good, but the balance is key. Yes. And it's good that you're the planner and she's not, because I need a planner because I'm not. And so that structure, like what we were talking about with Toastmasters, is key because within that structure we have the flexibility, and Brendan Absolutely. Talks about that too. All right, your mantra is challenge the status quo and question everything. And I really, really appreciate you sharing that, because I feel like everything you've talked about so far has been challenging the status quo and questioning everything. And so I would love if you can just cap us off here with how you live into that mantra.
I absolutely thank you for that, because it initially started out just because of my passion for process improvement. But then the more that I evolved and I realized like development in general, whether that's going to be a process or in your own life, people or something like that, being able to pause and just question, is this the best way? Is there another way to do it? I think a lot of times we can fall trapped that this has been working and there's no reason to try it differently. Or this has always worked in X, Y, whatever kind of those windows or blinders that we put on. But allowing the opportunity, either you are questioning the situation or allow the opportunity for somebody else to question it, be like, does this really need to be done this way? Do we need to really have a plan when we go to the mountains this weekend? Anything in that fashion, like, do I really need to do this? And allowing your opportunity to question that process and challenge everything, because you really know, like, why are things being done the way that they're done? Sometimes you have, especially in organizations where you're doing a process or something is written into the operating procedures that way, but hasn't been updated for years. We'll take the time to see, is it still relevant? Do you really need to keep operating this way? I've used a tool like this where we were having a conversation at work. People weren't happy with one of our processes to remove explosives from our explosive locker. So we mapped it all out. We mapped out the process. They questioned it. We mapped it out. And we realized that a lot of the reasons we were doing business was a lot of federal regulations mandated the process. It wasn't Ken Lewis implementing stupid procedures. But if it was Ken Lewis implementing stupid procedures, it allowed them the opportunity to revise that process to what actually needed to be done. Mm-hmm. So, but we gave that exercise we went through that scenario just to really give it a chance. Like, do we actually have to? I don't know. Well, let's play it out. And we dedicated about an hour and a half to that whole thing. Was any of the work being done? No, but if we could have changed it, that would have been a huge, I think there was a lot. One, if we could have changed it, morale would have been huge because it was bothering everybody. But then also it eliminated that conversation because it wasn't just because the boss said so. Right. So that applies to life too. What are you doing? Does this really need to happen this way? Or what can we do to make this better? Again, back to the event response outcome. Always looking at what can you actually have influence over to change the outcome if you didn't like it, to improve it. And I think we should always be challenging ourselves to improve, whether, again, that's within your business, your personal, professional life, or whatever habits you have. How can you steadily develop yourself to be a better person for the next day, and then challenge those that you influence to think and do the same?
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Thank you so much for coming on today. In order for people to book you, to learn about your coaching programs, where is the best place for people to find you? And of course, it'll all be in the show notes.
The best place would be on our website, kenllewis.com, and that's LEWIS. And that's a good starting ground just to kind of see. And it's obviously with any website, they're always developing. But I'm most active on LinkedIn as well, so my profile's on that thing. But those would be the best two resources to reach out and have a discussion.
Yeah, and all the handles are at Ken Lewis, number 2 at the end of them. And of course, big shout out to Veterati, which is the organization that you help out. So thank you so much for that. And then thank you so much for your service. We really do appreciate it. And thanks for coming on today.
Oh, thank you, Michael, for this opportunity and for everything you do for your audience and the guests. I mean, you really made this feel like a coffee table chat, right? It felt real personal. So thank you for that environment. I really appreciate it. And for the great questions too. It was really fun.
Cool, man. Same here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.